Okay, thanks, guys. So our first presenter is Kirsten, and I'd like to talk about Kirsten a little bit before we put her on the stage. Okay, so her bio, I'll read that out to you. Kirsten currently teaches English to young learners in Busan, South Korea, where she has lived since 2017. Her next milestone will be completing an MA TESOL from the University of Sunderland in 2021, so quite soon. Since 2018, she's been a member of KOTESOL, and since 2019 has lectured for the NIIED training income EPIC teachers. So EPIC is in Korea our public school for younger learners during orientation throughout the year. This year, she is a KOTESOL Busan Gyeongnam chapter secretary for 2021 and hopes to connect members with opportunities for personal and professional development. Also, part of her duties as our chapter secretary is she edits and takes content for our newsletter. So if you would love to write something or contribute a video or any kind of content, she's a girl that you want to talk to. We are trying to publish the letter every month, but we'll see how it goes. So keep that in mind. And we're ready for you, Kirsten.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Kirsten. And yeah, as Rhea said, I'm really interested in interviewing people and speaking to people about what they do, whether it's in Korea or outside of Korea, related to English education, English language learning. So please do get in touch. I will share my email address during the presentation, and I can probably pop it in the chat box a bit later. So I am able to share my screen. Yes.
Yep.
Okay. I will get this started then. Let's have a look. Oh, it says host has disabled participant screen sharing.
Oh, hold on a moment.
I think it needs to be enabled.
So
yeah, no problem. So I'm going to be talking about fitting learning into life. So I started my research project in 2018, and my research was conducted in January of 2019, so just before everything stopped being in person. So I am actually really curious about how, if I had done this research project later, what the difference would be between the students' habits. So first, I'm just going to talk a little bit about what is MALL, M-A-L-L. It's a mobile assisted language learning. Oh, here we go. I can share my screen. So, oh. Yeah, so here's my email. I will pop it into the chat box. So what is MALL? So mobile assisted language learning, it's anything that uses a mobile device. I'm just going to unshare my screen for a little bit. And I will share again later. So, okay, first I'm going to go through my idea. So as an English teacher in the classroom, we often use technology, and it is, I usually focus on a textbook. So I do use technology to prepare like lesson materials, and we now have smart screens in the classroom. And most of us will use technology during our practice to aid our teaching and help our students learn, because technology is becoming more integrated into our, not just our daily lives, but into the education system. But outside of the classroom, how much of a role does technology play in our everyday lives? It's become really integrated through mobile devices. And it's also started to influence how we learn. So my research was with a group of Busan University students, and I was able to investigate the emerging styles of learning that happen outside the classroom and discover how the students fit their learning into life. The group of students I actually met through an English language club. It was a university club, and we're still meeting, however, it's online now. And we were meeting once a week, but what I noticed about these students is none of them were majoring in English education. apart from maybe 1 or 2. So this is a big group of students. There's probably 30 altogether, but only 8 became part of my actual study. So what were they doing? Some of them wanted to study English for reasons like exams, like TOEIC and TOEFL proficiency exams. But most of them actually weren't interested in that aspect of studying, but they were still pretty motivated. They wouldn't turn up every week to the meeting. Every week we would have maybe 15 or 20 people. This is pre-corona, of course. And I wanted to find ways to self-study too. I was learning Korean through them. So I started to dig a little. And I was also at this stage starting to formulate my research questions for my MA. And I realized that there was one thing that linked all of their informal studying together. And that was textbooks. It wasn't hagwons that they were going to. It wasn't actually study groups with other students or even our kind of meetings. The thing that connected their learning was specifically mobile technology. And in my study, I found that they used 3 different types of tools, and they were mainly laptops and tablets, but mostly like 90% of them were using their mobile phones. So in the past, research in Tamil has shown that studies use a variety of mobile technology, for example, MP3 players, radios, Palm computers, electronic dictionaries and iPods. Do you remember those? But among the students I surveyed, only 3 types were used, and this really surprised me. But I guess it's indicative of what South Korea looks like right now. As we know, South Korea is pretty well connected. So I'm going to reshare my PowerPoint now and jump back into there. Here we go. So 94% of Koreans have a smartphone. And 96% of Koreans use the internet on a daily basis. So how do university students actually approach their informal learning in the context of mobile assisted language learning? So I want to talk a little bit more about the students before I dive into what I found. So the participants were all from university in Busan who studied English in their own time. I made a survey and I actually advertised it on the university information board. And after filtering through all the applicants, I realized that there were around 10 students who fitted all my requirements. And out of those 10 students, I was able to have 8 interviews, in-person interviews with students. So it was really interesting because I actually offered the option of having in-person interviews or telephone interviews because I thought it might be difficult to arrange times to meet up, but every single student wanted to meet in person. And I later found out this was because they saw the interview itself as an opportunity for practicing their language learning. So they were a very highly motivated group of students. And I built upon previous research in Tamil that used a socio-cultural approach. So what does that mean? I was looking at previous studies, and most MAL studies that I came across looked at the technology itself, so either the devices, it looked at the apps themselves or platforms, but very few studies I found actually looked at what students were doing. But this framework developed by Ma divides the way students mediate mobile technology into 3 areas. So the first areas is other agents, such as teachers, classmates, peers, and friends. Because I was looking at informal learning, this didn't really factor into the data or the results a lot. So I was really looking at 2 main things, which were the mobile technologies, the physical tools. So this wasn't actually just the devices, but it was also what they were doing on the devices, apps and programs or anything, any tool they were using, videos as well. And also the L2 agency, the psychological tool. So this came down to personalization. So in my survey, I looked at their motivations, their learning beliefs, and also their attitudes as well. And we'll see how that pans out in a bit. So what I found interestingly, I know this is a lot of data, I'm sorry, I couldn't narrow it down, but I'm going to pull out the main things here for you. Multimedia was used a lot, many different types of multimedia by the same students, e-resources and learning apps, with a focus on the e-resources rather than the learning apps, and social communication tools were really up there. I did not expect that, but I'll go through that now. So the top 3 types of tools, as you might expect, were multimedia, Netflix and YouTube. So what were they doing with Netflix? Well, they were using subtitles. They were watching dramas in English and using subtitles to either understand what was going on or to shadow. So that's when you read along or talk along with the characters, which is really interesting. And YouTube as well. That was more an entertainment aspect. So looking up things they liked, cooking, hobbies, personal interests, but looking for material in English rather than in Korean. They also used e-resources and learning apps. So this, surprisingly, a lot of students were interested in, rather than the apps, looking at blogs, looking at TED Talks, which came under e-resources, and looking at websites as well. And finally, the social media tools, unanimously, Kakao Talk, the little yellow thing there, was used with the students. This is a really common communication, like a WhatsApp. It's an app for communication used in Korea, and but it has a lot of functions, as well as text messaging. You can do voice messaging, and it actually links into a lot of things like shopping, and it has a lot of things. So it's very ubiquitously used around Korea. Okay. So the locations that students used was also quite interesting. And I actually developed the framework a bit further when looking at the spaces. I decided to look at the location types. So this was pre-corona, so cafes were still open. It was very easy for students to be traveling around, and obviously they're looking back on their recent experiences. But I found that most of the learning occurred at home or in their dormitories as a university students. But interestingly as well, the transient spaces were quite popular, like buses, metros, waiting in queues and while traveling. And finally, public spaces as well. The formal learning spaces weren't as popular, but I was focusing more on their informal learning. So it wasn't as connected to their actual degrees as it could have been. So what I found using the framework, I really wanted to focus down on their motivations, beliefs, and attitudes. And I found that I could also divide this into different selves of the students. So a really huge motivation for Koreans to learn English is a future employment. For jobs, not just jobs outside of the country, but within Korea, English is is quite important, sometimes not for the role specifically, but just to pass the interview. Studying abroad, a lot of these students wanted to study abroad, even though they weren't going to English-speaking countries. They wanted to learn English or improve their English so that they could study in courses where English is required. Maybe the course was in English. There were a few students who were interested in Germany, and I think also one student was interested in going to Denmark as well. Also, another thing that surprised me was that students are really interested in looking at research. Several students commented on that. A lot of research in their areas for their majors is written in English, or textbooks are in English. So there was a really big motivation there to improve their English so that they can have access to all this information. When looking at their when looking at their beliefs around English learning, these were all coming from their past self, the person that was learning English within the education system, elementary school, middle and high school. They were taught to believe that English is important as a lingua franca, but they also had experiences that gave them beliefs such as English education is lacking, in their own words, because it's so test focused and focused on university entrance in Korea, like the Sunung exam has the English language component, and also tests to get into a good middle schools and high schools. So it was that was some of their beliefs that came from their past selves. So their current selves, using the MAL to learn English, a lot of the students felt that they weren't really learning. There was a huge aspect of entertainment in their practices. They were having fun outside of their formal education, outside of their degrees. And for the majority of students, the feeling was really that learning English in this way is really motivating, it's really rewarding, and it's really fun. So before I move on, I just wanted to share with you one of the apps I found. So I have a bit more time, yeah. So as a Korean language learner, I struggle to find a lot of the tools that the students use, although it's getting easier and easier as an English speaker learning Korean. Koreans have way more access to these tools online through their devices, and I'm very jealous of them. But I found this example on Instagram. So you can learn like a kind of a phrase, but kopsari, what is it? Between. It actually means to be a third wheel. So then you've got some examples. I don't want to be a third wheel with you guys. Obviously, maybe they're on a date or something and a friend wants to tag along, and other ways to use the word. So the benefits of this kind of tool, this kind of digital tool, is that you can learn, you can have exposure to English that the students can't have maybe in their everyday life because they're in their home country. They're not in the country of the target language. So they can come across these little phrases and more colloquial language compared with their textbook and their formal learning. The downsides of an app like this are that it's not repetitive. So Instagram is a feed, so you'll come across words, and unless you save them, every day new words are coming up. So these are really good for like exposure to language, but maybe not so good for the repetitive memorization that you might need for tests or learning that needs to be measured at a later point or have a certain purpose like testing. So I'm going to go back now here. Okay. So in summary, the benefits of MAL that emerged for these students was the authenticity of the materials. They could access materials that are not made specifically for language learning. It gave them a style of immersion. Obviously, right now, it's really hard to travel to the country of the language you're learning. And in the past, it has been really popular if you want to learn English very well. Korean students may often go to Philippines, Australia. If they have a bit, if they want to spend it more, they could go to the US, they could go to the UK. But here now, through MAL, they have the opportunity to access all these different materials without having to spend the money to travel. They also get access to other agents. So while they it wasn't connecting them with teachers as such, they were connecting with friends through their social media and having natural conversations and learning language rather naturally. And they had the convenience of time and space, so they can choose when to learn. Students these days often have to work part-time jobs in Korea, as in many countries in the world, and they're juggling their their daily university lectures and part-time jobs, and also socializing with friends. So MAL really helps them to fit their learning into the life when it's convenient for them. Some of the challenges that I found that the students experienced was a time delay on feedback when they're in using apps like HelloTalk to chat with people. HelloTalk is specifically for language learning, but also for making friends as well. Sometimes you're in a different time zone, especially if you're connecting with somebody on the other side of the world. So if you have questions or things come up, you don't have the same dynamic as you might in a classroom where you can ask the teacher, oh, I don't understand this word, or can you repeat that again, or can you show me that again? Language ability was a big limit to access. So a few of the students I interviewed at first through the questionnaire, the online questionnaire, I couldn't interview them because they didn't understand enough to firstly answer the questionnaire fully, but also I realized they weren't able to access that many tools online. So this kind of language learning is really only suited for a slightly higher level of students. It's that there are things for beginners, but they'll be different. As they progress, they'll have more access to a wider variety of materials. Measuring progress can be really hard. If they are using a language learning app which records things, then obviously you can see your progress really clearly. But if you're taking a more organic and a personalized approach to your language learning and using different tools here and there, you might not be able to measure your progress. And that can actually be a little bit demoralizing if you've spent time watching things and learning things, and then you're talking in real life or trying to connect with somebody and you get stuck. That can be a bit demoralizing. So there you go, the self-motivation that they have to be strong enough to keep their motivation up, to keep their patterns and learning progress going. So looking forward, I would really be interested in seeing how their habits have changed during the pandemic. But also I noticed that the students I interviewed reported receiving no input in their formal learning environments about informal approaches to MAL. And that really surprised me because we all have mobile phones. We're all, well, some of us use, Instagram, Facebook, other apps. And it might be that they just didn't realize that their teachers or tutors or lecturers were introducing them to things they could do. But I didn't meet a single student who actually verbally could say, yes, I remember when a teacher told me this is a great resource. So that's possibly because some of the resources, they're made by Koreans for Koreans. Maybe we just don't know about them. So maybe that would be an avenue worth exploring, like collating different things for our Korean learners. Another thing was that my demographic, I only looked at Korean students. There are international students as well in Korea and all over the world where we could study these habits as well. And also, what would a bigger study bring? My study was very small. It was only 8 students. And I'm really interested to do a bigger study because there could be differences according to, obviously, the technology available. There's differences according to maybe gender and other factors like economic factors as well. So yeah, that's about it. Oh my gosh, that's on time. And just here, the references, the credits. If you have any questions about anything I've talked about, please feel to ping me an email, and I will leave that right here, and I'll put it in the box later. Thank you for listening.
Bravo, bravo. I think you can hear me now. Oh, I love
Yes,
that, Kirsten. Thank you for sharing. So Kirsten will be also repeating a similar presentation at the International Conference and the Grad Student Showcase.
It's a little bit different.
A little different, but along the same theme.
It's about how to do a distance MA. It's called SOS to Success, or tools for helping distance learners, because we don't have the support of like in-person support. And yeah, but this experience of producing what I've just told you about, it informs that tool completely.
Okay, thank you for clarifying. I'm
No
personally
problem.
interested. I plan to use an app for the first time, similar to Memrise with my students. And
Oh, nice.
yeah, I'm curious to see how that will go. Perhaps we could work together to do something. Does anyone have questions? We have a few minutes before our next presenter begins. If you have a question, you can drop it in the chat or just speak up. We have a few minutes. I think people are still taking everything in. Okay. Great tool
I
for
don't have a question, but I have a comment. Just that I dropped in the chat. I'm not sure if you're aware of the tool language learning with Netflix.
I am not.
It is a great tool. I think it only works with Google Chrome,
Okay.
and it's a plugin. And what it does is it goes above and beyond just the normal subtitles, and you can pause and rewind by phrase. So it's something where you said we're like, teachers don't talk to the students about small and how they can use it. And this is one way that might make, well, you made one observation that the students didn't see this casual English input as learning.
Yeah.
And this might hijack that. So this could actually, have a rebound effect. I got this for my own Japanese language learning, and I ended up getting frustrated because I couldn't keep up with it. So I stopped using it, but it's a great tool.
That's a really good tool to know about. Thank you.
Yeah.
I use that
I'm sure
myself
there's
for Korean. I find it's pretty nice if you're that
Wow.
fastidious.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's many tools that I haven't come across in my research, but yeah, I'm always looking for new things.
Personally,
and also time to try them.
The metacognitive aspect of measuring your progress, I find Korean students need to actually be pointed in the direction of realizing how much they've learned, or students in general. And I like to actually make a classroom activity out of that. So I love that you brought that up in your research. We're at 2:34, so it's time to bring on our next presenter. I'd like to share his bio with you, everyone, so I'm just reading this out to you. Daniel Jones is a professor at Yongjin University in Daegu and serves as a financial affairs chair of KOTESOL, so that's a national council position, as well as our local chapter treasurer. He has a YouTube channel called Epic Investing Nerd, and I really, really recommend you check it out. There's a gold mine of stuff in there. He teaches financial and investing basics for beginners and thinks it should be part of young learner education as well. He has 10 years of EFL teaching experience, most of which has been at the university level. He's a self-proclaimed gamer dork and loves anything sci-fi and fantasy. So I present to you Danny. You can take it away if you want to screen share, go for it. So you have until 2:55, Danny. Thank you.
Okay, hello everybody. This is me. I'm the cat. This is my pet human. The cat will take over now. Okay, so hello everybody. Yes, I am. Rhea, you forgot about how I'm also a multimillionaire and own a Ferrari and a yacht and a golf club and all the other. No, I'm kidding. Yeah, no, this is not how finances work. I will. So anyway, let me just see here. How am I gonna screen share? I did this before. Hopefully nothing too shameful is up on the screen. No, it's not good. Okay. I'm a big joker. Let's see. I wrote everything down here. So I usually do these these online classes where I have like a script in front of me, and then I'm kind of looking back and forth between the PowerPoint and whatnot. So by the way, if anybody has any questions or I'm going too fast, go ahead and let me know, because I know that for many people, finance is a really stressful and intimidating topic. And one of my objectives today is to make you unintimidated by finances. So I'm gonna do my best not to come. I know that many people have a lot of misconceptions about financial wellness too. And I can honestly say that I'm really not whenever you talk about financial wellness and you try to come off as a financial advisor, I really don't want to sound braggadocious or like a dick at all, because if there's one thing I've learned about investing and finances, it's that pride goeth before a fall. Always be humble. And a little humility goes a long way. A lot of humility goes really far in finances, by the way. So that being said, I was at one point unemployed and homeless, and I was actually kind of a quasi-legal immigrant. And since then, I have been doing, the long story short is I researched a lot about how to properly handle finances, how to properly budget, where to put your money, how to do those kinds of things. And now I'm better off than most, but I want everybody to learn this kind of stuff. I feel that there is not enough financial education, and I feel that are so many misconceptions about how to get wealthy and how to stay wealthy and how to achieve financial success. It's something that I want everybody to learn. So that being said, one of my objectives here is I want everybody to, be unintimidated by it. It's fun. It's really way more fun than you might think. And also, I want to make sure that everybody has some myths and misconceptions about growing wealth dispelled. So can everybody see my screen? Good. Okay. Well, I asked on Facebook. Oh, by the way, Rhea, are you recording this? Is this being recorded? Good. Oh, good. Okay. Phew. All right. Just making sure. I was thinking about uploading this or at least parts of it to my YouTube channel. I asked on Facebook what you guys wanted to hear about. And I'm kind of glad I did, because along with hearing requests for things to talk about, it also sheds some light on what I think is a common problem, which is I feel many financial struggles are based in worrying about the wrong things. Here you'll see this pie chart. Most people asked about investing, good. A lot of people asked about pension and taxes. You'll see here only one person asked about budgeting, and another one person asked about retirement. So, oh, are there questions? I'm hearing some chatter. I didn't know if there was a question.
Somebody has their mic on.
Oh, whoops, sorry. It's okay. I don't mean to shame anybody. All right. Anyway, you'll see here, yes, I feel that many people are focusing on the wrong things. And here I'm going to answer this in a somewhat roundabout way. In 2016, this is my roundabout answer. Well, what about pension? What about taxes? Okay, here's my roundabout answer. In 2016, the CDC did a survey, and they discovered that most people overwhelmingly overestimate their chances of dying in a terrorist attack or a homicide attack. And they underestimate critically their chances of the most common forms of death, most common causes of death, especially heart disease, which is number one. And I'm not trying to underplay or fluff terrorism or homicide. What I'm saying is that if the US government and the media and people in the public focused more on heart disease and cancer and traffic accident, lower respiratory diseases, and way less on homicide and terrorism, that the actual cause of death fatality rate would plummet. People are focusing on the wrong thing. They're asking about terrorism and homicide, and that's not what people should be worried about. They should be worried about heart disease, and they critically overestimate it. The reason I mention this is because I feel many people are overemphasizing taxes and pensions. Now, I don't mean to scare anybody here, but you're not going to get rich off of your pension, especially if you live in Korea. In fact, nobody will. It is absolutely not enough. Taxes are a flea bite compared to debt. Most people here, you'll see, asked about investing, pension, and taxes. What really is most important, I think, is budgeting and getting rid of debt, then investing. Right here, you'll see nobody asked about getting rid of debt. And I think I know the reason. It's because it's terrifying to think about. Don't worry, don't be afraid of it. I'm going to help you through that one as well, because taxes are nothing. Can't hold a candle to how much debt is going to cost you, how much more debt is going to cost you. So I want to focus on the right things here. I could present about how to get lower taxes and about your pension, but I feel that doing so would be a disservice to you. Hosting a seminar on financial wellness and focusing on pension and taxes, I feel would be like hosting a seminar on how to get a girlfriend and only talking about, well, yeah, but what about six-pack abs? You know, what about I need a girlfriend. How do I get six-pack abs? I need a girlfriend. How do I get a Ferrari? It's like, well, that's not how you get a girl. That's not, if you get a girlfriend, there's other things you need to focus on. So it's like, nobody's going to get a girl just with your six-pack abs and your Ferrari. That's not the way girls work. Nobody's going to get rich just from your pension. That's not how getting rich works, especially in Korea. Unfortunately, you're going to see here. The OECD poverty rate, a lot of Koreans learned this lesson the hard way, and they didn't learn it at all early. Korea has the highest elderly poverty rate in the entire world. And many Koreans thought their pension was gonna do it. And unfortunately, it isn't. So, by the way, I'm not saying a pension is bad. It's nice. It's just a bonus. It's not gonna be enough to suffice you. So I will answer questions about taxes and pensions if you can pass this little quiz for me. I'm going to give you a little quiz, just a little quiz. Yeah, I know you hate me right now. Too bad. True or false? Question number 1. Go ahead and think about this. I have enough cash right now to cover a 1 million won medical emergency right now. A, definitely true, or B, false or uncertain. Question number 2. Question number 2. How much debt do you have? A, none. B, a little that could be paid off within 6 months. C, a lot that could be paid off within 3 years. Or D, I don't want to think about it. Question number 3. PFT, pulmonary finance test. How long could you hold your breath without dying? If you suddenly got laid off without any paycheck, how long could you survive without getting paid again? A, more than 6 months. B, 2 to 5 months. C, 1 month or less. Or D, Danny, are you trying to give me a panic attack? If you answered false D and D, as a matter of fact, you're normal. I know it's not supposed to be true, but it is. In every single country, most people have less than $1,000 saved. In every single OECD country, people have more debt than they have cash, way more. And that's about $60,000 in debt, median average, by the way. Most people do not have enough to cover, they are working paycheck to paycheck. They have absolutely no savings. So if you are like most people, that's what I'm here for. That's what this presentation is here for. I am here assuming I could answer questions about pensions and taxes, but I'm here kind of assuming that you're about most people. Worrying about pensions and taxes, if you don't have any cash and you don't have any savings and you're in debt, this is about the same thing as me like ordering a cake slathered in nacho cheese every single meal and asking for a Diet Coke. It's not okay. You're good, but you're focusing on the wrong part. There's another thing you need to focus on. So By the way, now some of you are going to ask, okay, well, how do you do it? What do you do? If it's not pensions, if it's not taxes, what do you do? How do you, what's your secret there, Danny boy? Well, I'll say this, another roundabout answer slightly. This is me a couple of years ago on the left. And the other one is me now on the right. I lost 100 pounds. That is all me. The answer to how you get rich, there's a little parallel to losing weight. Losing weight, weight loss, is calories in, calories out. Burn more than you eat. What's the second step? There isn't one, period. If you burn more calories than you eat, you will lose weight, period. Math is math. Math is math. Like that, like from The Incredibles too. Math is math. If you burn more calories than you intake, you will lose weight. If you eat more than you burn, you'll gain weight. So what does that have to do with getting wealthy? Same thing. The key to weight loss, calories in, calories out. Lose more calories than you intake. Not easy, but very simple. How do you get wealthy? Money in, money out. Spend less than you intake. There. What's the second step? There isn't one. There isn't. Math is math. If you spend less than you intake, you will get richer over time. Not necessarily simple, not easy, but very simple. Math is math. Lose less cash than you intake, and ensuring this is extremely simple. All you have to do every time you get paid, take some of it, stash it away. You must take some of that cash, put it away forever. It's yours. I call this paying yourself. That is how you get wealthy over time. All you have to do, money in, money out. Every time that you get paid, if you take nothing else from this presentation that I'm going to give, take this, because it's the lesson I had to learn the hard way. It's like touching the stove versus telling someone not to touch the stove. I was unemployed and homeless, and I was quasi-legal immigrant. I had to learn this lesson the hard way. I'm just telling you not to touch the stove. 20%, aim for that. That's paying yourself. Pension doesn't touch this method. If you want to get wealthy, pension does not touch that. It can't hold a candle to it. Again, I'm really trying not to come off any way arrogant or whatever when I say this. Pride goeth before the fall. I'm just saying I know what I'm talking about. I've been living in Korea for 10 years. My pension right now, after 10 years of working, is less than 1/10 of the money that I have saved. It is a bonus. And you can get there too. I did it. I did. Look. You could lose. I lost weight. You could get there too. I got financially okay. You can too. Okay. I want everybody to be. I'm not saying, oh, look at how great I am. I'm saying, look at what you can do to in order to get wealthy, because by focusing on the right things. So that's the biggest part of this presentation, is pay yourself first. Getting rich is money in, money out. That's all that it is. And by the way, this is just paying yourself. I call it paying yourself. If you do not save money, you're committing self-harm. Don't commit self-harm. You know, just set yourself, if you can't do 20%, do 15. If you can't do 15, do 10. Try to make it at least 10, because you'll be fine with 10, at least should be. And by the way, that's all that there is if you have no debt. If you have no debt and you keep that in mind, eventually you will get wealthier over time. Investing, pension, taxes, nothing gets you wealth faster than this method. Math is math. So that begs the question, okay, well, what if you do have debt? This is the other one. Taxes, again, are nothing compared to how much debt is going to cost you. Now, the good news, bad news, debt is scary, but you don't need to be afraid of it. It's simpler than you might think. And there are two methods for paying off debt that are better than tried and true and better than most, okay? By the way, if you don't have debt, you can relax through this part. Just remember the first part. Make a separate bank account that money's yours forever, in order to ensure that you in order to ensure that you're always getting more and more. Make sure that the money that you save is separate from your otherwise money. You keep that forever, ever, except for life or death emergencies. That is how you get wealthier over time, except life and death emergencies. If you don't have any debt, congratulations, by the way. If you have no debt and a penny in your pocket, you're worth more than 25% of American homeowners. That's the truth, by the way. People don't know what they're doing with their money, and they don't research it, and they have misconceptions about it. So here, anyway, how do you get rid of debt? First and foremost, chop up your credit card. Your credit card will destroy you. It is high interest debt. It will gain debt. You will be in debt faster than investments will pull you out. In the short amount of time, I will tell you 2 methods for getting out of debt that are tried and true. The first is something that we call the snowball method. This means that you pay off the smallest balance first. Every balance that you have, you look at them, you pay the minimum to each, except for the smallest one. You pay as much as you can to that one, and keep doing that until the smallest balance is gone. Then you keep going to the next smallest balance, and you'd pay minimum to everything until the next smallest balance is gone. Keep doing that until your debt is paid off. That is one method. The other method is something we call the avalanche method, which is the highest interest first. You start with you pay minimum to every debt you have except the one that charges the most interest. Then once that is paid off, you go to the next highest interest and the next until that's paid off. I know that this is easier said than done, but it is a plan and they absolutely do work. So which is best for you? It depends on the circumstances. If your debts are all under 10%, I would recommend 10% interest. I would recommend a snowball. If you have any debts over 20%, definitely avalanche, but it's up to you. So in the short amount of time that I have, I will try to address the other questions that you had that I'd been asked on my Facebook chat. Investing. Investing is the right way to put your money in a place where it grows interest in a safe, nice way. The first step to that, regardless of whatever country you're from, is to set yourself up with a brokerage. A brokerage is a place that connects your money or your bank account to a market. Whichever market it is, there's the Australian market, there's the German market, there's the US stock exchange. It's going to be whatever country handles the market in your area. And it's all online now, by the way. So I'm able to buy and trade stocks from right here from Korea. It is, as far as I know, perfectly safe. If you're American, I would recommend TD Ameritrade. I do not know much about other British or Australian or whatever other brokerage is, but I would assume that they're safe. In the very short amount of time, how much time do I have left, Rhea?
You have a couple more minutes, is okay?
Okay. In that case, I will try to tell you a little bit more about investing. Many have asked about stocks, individual issues. If you're starting investing, by the way, I never give financial advice that I don't follow. So everything that I say is something that I already have been doing. I would recommend you buy into an index fund or an index exchange traded fund, ETF. An ETF is like a stock. It's bought and traded like a stock. It pays dividends like a stock, but it's not a stock. It's like a duck. It sounds like a duck. It quacks like a duck. It swims like a duck, but it's not a duck. What it is it's something called a basket. You take a little bit of all kinds of things, you swirl it all together in a blender, and then you take little bits of that mush. And that's what an ETF is, basically. It's a little bit of everything. It's a little piece of everything. and it pays dividends also, usually. I don't buy any ETFs that don't pay dividends. Indexes, I would buy into an index fund. What is an index? You might have heard that word before. The index is the MVPs. They're the biggest companies that sell in a certain country. You might have heard of the Dow Jones. That's the top 30 largest companies. It's generally a gauge of how well the economy is doing overall. So if you buy into a Dow Jones ETF, you get a little bit of all 30 of the largest companies. The S&P 500 is another one. They are the top 500 companies, and you get little bits of whatever they have too. In Korea, we have KOSPI, which is all 760 plus traded companies. In the UK, there's the FTSE 100. Japan has Nikkei 225. The Germany has the DAX 30. It depends on what country you're from. All of them should be safe. These are tried and true methods for where to put your money. If you want it in a good, safe place that gains interest and pays you dividends, it's just a good place to keep it. It's better than keeping it in the bank in general. Once you do that, once you're ready to invest, I would also recommend bond funds or bond ETFs. A bond, similar to a stock, it's an investment, but it's not ownership of a company. It's just an IOU. The thing is that investing into diversifying into bonds requires more money because each bond is assumed to be about $1,000. Some people don't have that. As you may know, they don't even have that saved. But a bond ETF is much cheaper. They sell on the exchange just like a stock. They pay dividends just like a stock. But they're little pieces of all kinds of bonds. And then you swirl them together in a blender, and it's a little basket of just a little bits and pieces of bonds. So there's government bonds, corporate bonds, municipal bonds. I would recommend you buy bonds and bond funds. Bond ETFs would be best. And also, we're running out of time. So that's my recommendation to you. Be sure to diversify. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. But absolutely, the most important things are saving 20%. Ignore everything else I've said, and if you just remember to save 20%, math is math. You will grow wealthier over time. Though that, more than taxes and pensions, is what I would recommend that you focus on, along with the snowball and avalanche method for paying off your debt. You can take a screenshot of these. These are light fund reading and serious reading for how to grow financially well. Also, I can link these in the chat box, I suppose. Here are 3 videos that I have. Phew, for a second, I thought that said QAnon. I'm like, what have I been uploading? No, there's a W there. Phew. Yes, these are 3 videos that I have that are some of the most basic ones for that might answer some of your questions. So yeah, that's my presentation. If you have any questions, let me know though. Was that okay?
Wonderful, Paksu. Thank you.
Good. You're all of you are on mute, so I couldn't tell whether or not I totally bombed or if you're just all on mute.
So this is a pretty hot topic, and I just want to remind you, Danny will be part of a panel discussion at the international conference, a much lengthier, more in-depth look at this topic, and he'll be with other people who may discuss things like Korean pension. But I have to say personally, I've attended several of his sessions before. He knows a lot, and he approaches the topic, as you can see, with humor and empathy, and makes it almost fun to think about. And my apologies for the unmute moment, but ironically, it was about this topic because you never know if you're going to have a salary all the way through the year with COVID-19. Yes. But
okay.
I'm going to let you know a little bit about our next presenter now. And if you want to get any information about any of the speakers, you can just go into the Busan KOTESOL event page and find their information there and get in touch with them, or any one of us will connect you. So I'm sure that people have a lot of questions for him, and he will have more airtime the next time you see him online. But you can also reach out to him, and he's very responsive and friendly, I can say. So thanks, Danny.
You're welcome. I didn't realize that some people were commenting along the way. I was a little bit too focused on my on the texts on my little flashcards on my phone and the PPT. I didn't realize some people were. Sure, I'll send your. I'll send a link to the. Anybody who wants a link to the PPT, you can message me too. I'll let you know.
Yeah, but definitely do try to catch him at the international conference at the end of February, where he'll be in a panel discussion. And so from now, we have guest presenters from JALT in Japan, our next being Wayne. So I'm going to go ahead and let you know about his bio. He has an Ed.D. and is an assistant professor of English at, pardon my pronunciation, Fukui University of Technology in Fukui City. I'm sure he'll correct me later. Okay. And he's the current director of program for the NPO Japan Association for Language Teaching and JALT. So very involved with the planning of the last international conference there. His main duty is organizing the annual international conference and leading the conference team. As director of program, he sits on the board of directors for JALT. These two occupations allow him to explore research interests in global competence, leadership, as well as various disciplines within a language teaching environment, including curriculum design, project-based learning, listening and speaking activities, and teaching lifelong learners. When he's not teaching, conference organizing, researching, writing, Wayne can be found running through the streets of Fukui City, where he lives with his wife and daughter. And he also dabbles in the bass guitar, djembe drum, listens to a wide array of music, as we can see by his background, which is pretty cool. I'm talking about his screen background, and takes in a fair bit of geopolitical news media. It's my great pleasure to introduce Wayne today. Do we have screen share on? Yes. So welcome, Wayne Malcolm.
Hello. Can you hear me okay, I guess? Thanks.
Yep. I'm going to unmute myself here. Yep.
All right, great. Wow. This is, wow, it's cool. Those were two pretty cool presentations just before about the mall and the finances. We actually have a guy over here in Japan. His name is Ben Sheeran, and I think I put this in the chat. He does the same thing. He has like a background in finance, or he's really into it, and he really helps people kind of get on the page about retirement as language teachers and stuff. And we also have some AMs, an AM who's into that as well. So yeah, I highly agree, not to stay on the point of the last presentation, but that is something that, yeah, people never really think about, I think, when they get into language teaching, or at least people that I know here in Japan. They never really thought about retirement or how to manage their finances necessarily, in terms of like how Mr. Jones was just talking about the finances there. So it was a very good presentation. Thanks, that was great. Something people don't really think about, I think. Even in the States, when I was living there, I think we often think about money as just put it in the bank and let it build. But there's a whole world out there and a lot of it's really not that complicated. It sounds complicated, but it's not really that complicated. There's a whole world of, yeah, kind of securing your retirement, which is kind of cool. But all right, so yeah, I'm going to talk about the challenges and triumphs and things about doing a conference. And I don't really have I don't have a PowerPoint. I have a bunch of PowerPoints on this topic, but I wanted to kind of bring this down and make it a bit more personable, and just kind of talk about some of the ups and downs and some of the information that that I kind of learned on the fly, on the job. Because I will say that a lot of this was very new to me. Not necessarily conference organizing, but putting it onto an online format and what we had to do last year, yeah, we were kind of all doing it in real time. So it was a lot to take in and a lot to do. And yeah, so I'm just going to kind of talk about that. And feel free if you have any questions, if you have any comments, just jump right in and we can make this a bit more like a conversation than a straight Wayne talking for forever. But I just wanted to start with, yeah, I think first the challenges, and it was really, I think I personally myself, when I was told to think about an online conference, and that's kind of how it started. It was, hey, Wayne, and this was from the board of directors, what do you think, or put together a plan about an online conference, like, could we do this? And we had never really talked about it, but that's where it seemed a lot like the landscape was going, right? So this is obviously 2020, and this is like February, March 2020, and we're seeing this, you know, the pandemic kind of unfolding, but we were all thinking by summer we should be okay, right? At least listening to our leadership, we were thinking, oh, by summer, well, this is like, you know, this is like flu season stuff, right? By the summer, we'll all be, it'll be hot and people will be out and be okay, right? We'll all be healed and healthy, perfect. So that was kind of our thinking, but as obviously time went on, we realized, wow, this is a lot bigger than anyone possibly imagined. I'm talking about just regular people like us, not like, I'm not, I don't know what leadership and people who are actually informed were really thinking. What they were telling us was this, you know, hunker down for 14 days or a month and we should be okay. But that clearly was not the case. So, yeah, so the big challenge there was kind of understanding the landscape, figuring out like, wow, what are we really dealing with here? And I think as a conference organizer, and on the board of directors for an organization like JALT, which is, if anyone doesn't know about JALT, just very briefly, I mean, obviously we're Japan Association for Language Teaching, but we're one of the bigger organizations in JALT in Japan when it comes to the field of language teaching. I would gather we're probably one of the larger ones in the world as well. I mean, TESOL is kind of like the big dog. They have like tens of thousands of members, and you know, but Japan, in terms of Japan and East Asia and this Asia region, yeah, we're pretty big, and so we cover a lot of ground. We have a lot of members, over 2,000 members, and so there was a lot of, and we have chapters and SIGs, special interest groups. So there's a lot of different moving pieces in JALT to consider when saying, okay, we're going to put a conference online, because the way JALT is structured is that we have membership, and then we have membership dues that come from obviously members, and then we have conference revenue. So our conference, in terms of JALT, the way JALT is structured, the conference is a really big thing. It's kind of part of our brand when it comes to JALT. So when thinking JALT, a lot of people probably think, oh yeah, that's right, that conference in Japan that I went to, that's a pretty big thing, because that's our main event, our main like professional development event. We have a lot of other things happening, and the speakers after me will probably talk about that. Gary and Stephen, like, involved in the different other sides of JALT, they can probably say about that. But yeah, I mean, but the main deal is, the big dance is JALT every year, usually in November, the JALT International Conference. So that's really important, and not just from a professional development point of view, but from a revenue point of view. I don't really like to talk about money so much because I'm not a money person. To my wife's chagrin, I don't really focus so much on money. But something about JALT is that the money that comes in from the revenue that gets generated from our conference combined with our membership allows the chapters and SIGs to do what they want to do. So if a chapter or SIG wants, because they get different kind of funds, and the funds kind of go up and down based on the revenue from the conference as well as membership. So if you take away 50% of your operating budget, well, that's a pretty big thing. And that's kind of one of the decisions we were faced with is, hey, this is 50% of our operating budget for the year. Are we going to do a conference or not? Thankfully, knock on wood, real wood. Thankfully, JALT is, we put ourselves in a decent financial situation where if we wanted to, we probably could have said, hey, let's just not do a conference and hunker down and just do events, smaller events throughout the year and be, and just ride out this COVID deal, no need to go crazy dealing with everything. Probably could have done that. But it was decided pretty early on that was not the right thing to do. Not just because of the revenue side, but also you kind of need a bit of a presence. JALT is one of those organizations where we have a lot of volunteers, and again, our brand is our conference. That's a part of our brand. So taking away that would be like, well, what else is there to do? We're kind of going to be sitting on our hands, and that was just not a wise decision. So we quickly dispensed with that and said, okay, let's do a conference. And how's it going to be? Is it going to be face-to-face, hybrid, or online? That's kind of the big thing. So yeah, so once we made that decision, the rest was, it was all challenges because we're like, what are we going to do? How are we going to do this? So the challenges were far and wide. We just made lists, and we just were talking about challenges and how it was going to happen. That being said, obviously the opportunities were there, but but the challenges were obviously, like I said, getting the landscape, figuring that out, and assembling the team. You guys are probably dealing with this right now. Teamwork, assembling a team and figuring out the landscape of what you're dealing with. When I say landscape, I mean the online landscape, right? Because at that point, last year, early 2020, Zoom was there. People, Zoom wasn't just, this thing that people thought about, like, hey, let's do Zoom. It was around. I remember even in 2019, when I was organizing the conference in 2019, I would have meetings with people, and we were using Zoom. At that time in 2019, I was using Zoom, but I'd never thought anything about it. I thought it was like, oh, it's like Skype. It's just this fancy little thing that we, oh, it's cool. I could see everybody's face, so never thought about actually using it to make a conference. So there was a lot of talk about what to do. And I think as a conference organizer, you run through the, especially I think when you're dealing with an all volunteer organization, that's another thing about JALT is we're mostly volunteers. And I'm not sure how a lot of other organizations are structured. I've seen some, but most of what you see in JALT is done by volunteers. We have a professional staff, but it's like 4 people who work in Tokyo. And they do a lot of the day-to-day administrative work, which is really helpful because then that makes us have to go off and do the other structural stuff. But the other people you'll see here, Gary and Steve. I mean, Gary built the website and he's a volunteer. That's not his job. I mean, that's what he does sort of in his pastime, but I wouldn't say that's his job. Even though he's pretty good at it, he probably could make a job of it. He could probably get a lot of money for it, but he lives here in Japan and he builds websites, which is great. But those are volunteers. Those are people who are doing volunteers. All the room hosts, those are all volunteers that we had, if anybody experienced the JALT conference. But so a big piece of JALT is also that we're all volunteers, which means you have to ask people to do stuff. And that, I think, was the biggest challenge, is that you have to ask everybody to do, when you're putting together a team, you can't order anybody to do anything. You have to ask them. And you have to be ready for them to say no, because they very well could say no. And which means you have to have a backup plan. So our first plan and the challenge in dealing with that challenge was that, yeah, I had to put together a team. And that's probably was my biggest role, is putting together a team. And when talking about the challenge of building a team, putting together the team and then managing the team. So yeah, I had to put together a team, and that's probably, like I said, was my biggest role, where I kind of had to sit down and say, wow, who's going to be on this team? And then I go out and find people who need to do what we need to get done. The board of directors was incredibly helpful in terms of starting the process of, well, let's make a skeleton of what we need, of what we actually need in the conference, talking, et cetera. And then we went out and found people. And it wasn't me just going out and finding people. A lot of people just said to me, hey, talk to this guy and talk to this person. You might want to talk to Gary Ross, because he, you know, he did the JALT call and did the Pan Sig conference thing. And if you've seen that, which I went to and I saw, so I knew Gary's handiwork. And they're like, hey, talk to Gary, and then talk to this person, talk to that person. So then I had to go out and actually talk to those people. But again, I couldn't say to Gary, build a website for JALT 2020. I had to ask him to do it. And he could have said no. He could have been like, well, that's kind of a big thing. I'm not really sure that can work. And XYZ could have been a big no, but thankfully he didn't say that. He said, sure, I think I could do that. Maybe now he was probably saying like, oh, I should have said no. Saved myself the 10 years I aged over the 6 months. But yeah, so that's a big thing. I think that's a major challenge, that when you're doing a conference, especially in a volunteer situation, orders, you kind of got to build up trust and relationships with people. Otherwise, they're not going to do what you ask them to do. And the management of it is a very big thing. Maybe my temperament kind of goes to that. I think whoever's in a management role kind of has to be a bit of a even-keeled kind of person, because there will be times when people come and say, hey, Wayne, this person is not doing what I want them to do. Do something. I'm like, what, me do something? It's like, hey, you're the director of programs, so tell this person what to do. And that's sort of what you get paid for or don't get paid for. That's what you step into the role of. So sometimes you do have to do that. But so that's a major challenge, I think, is the larger the team is, the more people you have to manage. And I think an online conference, probably what you're learning now is your team gets very big very quickly. So yeah, the team gets very big very quickly, because you kind of need a lot of people to run things. For JALT, I know we had we had almost 70 room hosts, because when you think about a conference like JALT, we had 26 streams. So we had 26 independent Zoom rooms running. At the peak of the conference on Saturday, we had 26 Zoom rooms in session running all at the same time. But that's not 26 people sitting there for 8 hours a day, for 8 hours in a day. We had shifts of people, right? So you had about 3 or 4, you probably had double that. You had about 50 people running those rooms, and then you need backups. So to really get it done without taxing the people, you need about we needed about 75, a good 75 people to be room hosts over the 26 streams or 20, 25, 26 streams that we had going. So that was, and you probably are learning this now, the KOTESOL organizers, but yeah, hosting a room is not, can be very intense. It's not just click on and let the person do what they want to do or say what they want to say and you kind of sit back. There's a lot that really does need to happen. And we had people who, amazing organizers, 2 people, actually it started with 2, and then I learned that there were more people on the docket. So I had asked Jose Cruz and Jenny Crittenden these are 2 JALT members, to basically organize the room hosts. And they had done it for, I think, Pan Sig. And I said, organize the room hosts. And they're like, sure, great. So they got on their job. Next thing I know, they had drafted a few other people, a woman named Alex Burke and another woman named, I forgot her name. Kawakami is her name, is Susan. And, Samantha Kawakami. And she, yeah. And I mean, they did such a great job. And I was a little surprised that at first they said, we have a few other people that we put on the room host leadership roster. I was like, oh, who's that? And they didn't ask me, but they did it. But then again, that's another thing with leadership. You kind of have to trust the people that you put in charge. So it was after the fact that they asked me, oh, was that okay, Wayne, that we did that? I was like, hey, if you trust those people, I trust you. If you trust those people, just get it done. Because if there's a problem, I'm sure I'll hear about it, and then you'll hear from me. So that's kind of how it goes. If there's a problem, then you will hear from me. If there's no problem, you're totally fine. But that's a big thing, personnel. So we had really great personnel who seemed to know, who just knew what they were doing. And that was, that was really important to make everything going well. But like I was saying about the room hosts, our staff grew to like 75, like overnight. Obviously a lot of recruiting happened, and we recruited room hosts, and we had to train them. So this was done months in advance. We trained them. We had to figure all that out, and they figured all that out, and we got it done. But yeah, you end up getting a staff well over 100 people, and that's actually larger than a JALT in-person conference. Like we have interns and stuff like that, but in terms of like the volunteer staff who actually had to do stuff, this was a really big thing. Our interns do a ton of work, but we quickly made a decision that like asking the usual group of interns to be room hosts was like, no, we can't do that, because that would just be not only just the amount of people that we would need and their schedules and their students and their all this other stuff, but then having to actually the level of English that they would have to do over Zoom and the training and all that other stuff that would have been a lot of vetting that we would have to do in terms of students and stuff like that. So that was quickly dismissed about what we could ask them to do. But the volunteers that we got, were mostly JALT members. We had opened it up to, there was a little talk about, should it be just JALT members or anybody? I said, I didn't even think about it. I was like, it's anybody, whoever can, if anyone can turn on the computer and use Zoom, they are good. They are good. Just let them know that they're not getting paid. They can get a certificate of accomplishment or something or whatever. I'll be a reference for them. It doesn't matter. But But yeah, if they can turn on a computer and move a mouse, they can be a volunteer. And that's basically what happened, you know? So we had a lot of training to do. Some people really, the level of the learning curve was really fast because people had to get their tech skills up to speed just using Zoom and figuring out downloading this and uploading that and making sure PowerPoints are shared properly and all this other stuff. So that was a big thing. That was a massive thing, the staff challenge. And my guess is you're probably dealing with that because that's a linchpin of the conference experience. I'm happy to say I think JALT did it very well in that regard, because most of the feedback that we've gotten were that your staff was very good, your room hosts were very helpful, it was a pleasant experience. Of course, you always get, you know, a few people like, yeah, that person didn't do this properly, or I had a mistake and I couldn't figure it out and it didn't work. But on the whole, it was good, which goes to the credit of the organizers, the room host organizers, Jenny and Jose and Alex and Samantha and a bunch of other people as well. So staff is amazing, is a really big thing. And like someone said here in the, associates, yeah, in case. Yeah, so yeah, okay, I see what you're saying. And what someone said here, I think Michael just said, yeah, no professionals. Yeah, that's kind of the same. That's kind of the same. I mean, everyone who volunteers at JALT, they're professional teachers. You know, they're teachers. They're not MCs for radio hosts or something. And yeah, so it says as in we don't get paid. Yeah, exactly. We don't get paid for this. So, but their jobs are teaching. So while they're doing all this, we're doing, you know, they're actually working, making sure that their classes stayed. Oh wow, that's great. I will say that is something. I'm also looking at this chat here. He says you don't have any admin staff at all. That is a hurdle. That is a hurdle because we have 4 amazing staff in our Tokyo office that work with every. So yeah, so we have professional staff who are there full-time, part-time, but basically they're there all the time and they get paid and they pick up a huge amount of work that without them, yeah, it'd be even more difficult to do. But so we do have, at least we have that, which I think is a huge benefit. You know, JALT just made that decision to pay for those positions because they're necessary. So yeah, but we definitely have, you know, so that in terms of our staffing is really, really, really important. But the rest of the stuff is really all, but obviously the website design and all those room host stuff, those people are all unpaid. So, but that was a major challenge, scaling that up, because we really had to figure out how to do that. And thankfully over the 6 months, we had time as well. Like I said, assessing the landscape. We obviously heard of, you know, COVID really took off in March, unfortunately, and people were making decisions back then, and we saw that coming. So JALT is in November, so we had the benefit of like, all right, let's make a firm decision in June, and we still have quite a lot of time to put a conference together. So we really used our time effectively, I think, in terms of making a decision with that. So yeah, so that was a major challenge. I think that's probably the biggest challenge in terms of dealing with an online with online conferencing. Obviously, the second major challenge, and I mentioned this before, is when I said assessing the landscape, is figuring out the online format, and that was helped. Again, he's here, but he's blanked out. He's blanked himself out. Gary Ross. That was huge. That was no short. That was you know, that was a big ask, and it came through in a massive way, because without that online platform, that Gary designed, Eventzilla, without that online platform, we would have had to spend quite a bit of money. Not that we weren't willing to spend that money. I think we definitely had the finances to spend the money necessary to get an outside organizer. But one of the things about JALT is that, yeah, we are volunteers and we sort of pride ourselves on doing a lot of things in-house. It's not maybe just a source of pride, but we have a lot of expertise and a lot of people can do things. So we really save those funds so that we can channel them to our organization, to our chapters and our SIGs in a way. So we try to lower operational costs so that we can use the money for other things other than spending money on like a vendor. And that was, again, a decision that was made like, hey, let's see if, you think Gary can help us out here, and do you think we can work with his platform and get a site that can work for JALT National. And yeah, and it did, and it was a great thing. So we really never had to experience the outsourcing, dealing with that, like looking for bids and hearing proposals from companies and all that. We really didn't have to do that, which I'm doing that a little bit with another organization that's connected to JALT called the UALS, United Association for Language Society, and and right now we're talking about a website, but it's really kind of like we have to bid and make a proposal, then talk to our members and deal with all this other stuff, and it's not just, hey, can a member design a website that we need? No, nobody wants to do it and nobody can do it. So we have to go outside the organization and outsource this thing. I could only imagine what like KOTESOL was the first one that I saw that did it. I was talking with their advisor, and she told me, or told a bunch of us, about the process of getting bids. And it was, they have to do a lot, they have to hear proposals from people and then make a decision. And then obviously now you're working with an outside company, so you kind of have to make sure you trust that company. So that's a really big thing. Like I said, thankfully we never had to do that. And Gary came through in a big way. So that was a challenge that we never really had to meet in terms of getting a proposal, getting an outside outsourcing the job. We were able to do it, and like I said, he'll talk about it. I don't want to steal his thunder because I could sit here all day and just praise Gary about his system and about how it worked, and working with him and all this other stuff, because he's a really what needs to happen in terms of a conference platform and etc. So looking at before Gary came along. Yeah, so somebody asked, what were other platforms that you're looking at before Gary came along? Actually, we had talked about using Google as a basic platform, using Google, because we have an account like a G Suite account. So we were thinking maybe we could use the Google Meets, whatever it is, and because it would have been quote unquote free, how that have worked. Again, this was before we knew anything about like the optimizing Zoom and conference platforms. We were just going to like the lowest, like, how can we get this done? And our website website administrator was, we have this G Suite thing, maybe we could use that, and then we wouldn't have to worry about Zoom accounts and all this other stuff. So, but eventually, very quickly, it came to pass that Zoom integrated into Gary's platform. Zoom integrated into Gary's platform was the was the best option. Once we saw it in action, we we're like, wow, that's great. Now, if we could scale that up like dramatically, it'd be great. And thankfully, his platform is one that doesn't really, you don't really need to use Zoom. That was the interesting thing, is that it wasn't Zoom. You don't need to use any communication. It's like whatever communication platform you want to use, and then his platform like works really well with that. So if we wanted to use Google Chats, we probably could have, and then use Gary's platform to kind of broadcast it. That would have been fine. Only thing is that Google, not that I don't want to offend any Google lovers, but it just really wasn't functioning. It really was not as functional as Zoom. And I'm not a Zoom. I don't get paid by Zoom, but for me it wasn't. I was like, wow, that's cumbersome. So it came down to the marriage between what Gary's platform and the way that was set up with Zoom kind of really went, kind of took us off. There were some others that I looked at. There was one called, and I keep getting emails from them because I actually I sent a request in, or not a request, I sent like an inquiry in about something. It's called like Open Water from the United States. And they popped up, and they do platforms as well. But they cost a lot of money. They were a little, I wouldn't say they were cash prohibitive, but it's on a scale. So if you want this kind of level of service, you pay like, $5,000. If you want this level of service, you pay more. If you have this level of service, you pay more. So it got like, wow, okay. So we're starting at like, basically you're starting at like $5,000 US, which in Japan is like, what is that? Like 50 million, no, like 5 million yen or so. A lot of money when you're talking about conferencing, but when you're scaling everything back and you're using online platforms, and you could get something equal for cheaper, $5,000 US for people that you can't see and can't readily contact is you got to think about where you're putting your money, and that's just a start. So probably a conference like JALT, we probably would have had to spend probably about $15,000, maybe $20,000 US if we wanted a really good conference platform, because obviously they'll upsell you stuff like that. They'll upsell you, oh, you need this. Oh, by the way, you can make an app, and then you can do this, and then the app can make people do this. And then when you realize what a conference really is, it's about people communicating. It's not about like apps and all that other stuff. It's about communication. So how best can I get people to communicate to other people and make sure the platform doesn't crash? That's what I don't want, right? That's what I want. And if that's going to cost me 20 grand, do I need all this other stuff, to strip all that other stuff away? So, that's something that was really important. And I think obviously working with Gary understood that because he's a JALT member. So he kind of understood the minds of JALT members, which is really helpful. So we never had to explain like, Gary, you understand JALT members, they do this. He's just like, I am a JALT member, of course I understand. So he totally got it. He was like, there was none of that trying to introduce yourself to each person and then comparing prices. Oh, this person charges 15 grand for that. This person charges 20 grand, but they know this. So yeah, it can get kind of expensive. But again, but there's also something, and I don't want to totally dump on paying for something. The thing with paying for something is that, like I was saying before, we can't tell Gary necessarily what to do. If he says yes, he's going to help us, then we have an agreement. Okay, then here's how you can help us. But when you're paying that kind of money, when you're paying someone, you pretty much can tell them whatever you want. So that's kind of another, that's a little bit baked into it, that if you're paying 15 grand for something and they don't do what you want, they're on the hook as well, right? So So you're paying for something, and you're paying for a service, It's not free. So there's a whole lot that kind of goes with that as well. So it just matters what is your priority, what you want to do, and how you want to get it done. I think that's a big thing. You know, that's a big thing that goes with making that kind of decision, and that's important. So I imagine you guys already have the KOTESOL group already has a set of platforms that they're going to use from. I should know this because I'm going to have to make a presentation. The different kinds of apps that are necessary. That's also something actually that was a bit of a that we did talk about was what kinds of things to add on to the conference, like what kind of platforms we can use in terms of, are we just going to use Zoom, or are we going to use something like what is it, you guys, a Weblet or something like that? Or what's the Flipgrid? We use Flipgrid a little bit. We use Flipgrid for one little impromptu thing, but again, we just decided keep it simple. Zoom it, done, and you know, set up Zoom rooms, train people on Zoom so that we're not all over the place with certain things. If people wanted to use something, if it integrated into Zoom, that's fine. Go ahead, you can use it. Totally fine. So that's it. Padlet and Discord. Yeah, that's right. So we had just decided that yeah, what's our base? How do we want to get it out? Maybe we would probably for next year, for this year, 2021, maybe we make a different decision because we obviously know more. But at that time, last year, and it's not that far, you know, it's not that far in the past, but last year, June, etc., we were just like, how do we get this up and get it a basic platform, get it up and get the experience? So yeah, but there were things that I did learn which were great, like someone just wrote here, like Rhea just wrote, like Flipgrid. That was great. I mean, I'm a Flipgrid convert now. I mean, I'm going to use Flipgrid in my classes for next semester because it was just like so easy to use and so interactive. And I thought, like, wow, where have I been? You know, where have I been for the past like 5 years? You know, I had heard of Flipgrid, but I never used it. But again, I think I had just like tunnel vision, like, how do I get to the end of this tunnel? You know, so that was a really big thing. We just decided to keep it as simple as possible. Gary's platform, Zoom, bang, just get it done. And that's kind of how, and even that presented, and Gary again will probably tell you this, that even presented some really interesting issues. I know Gary spent a little bit of time learning how to reprogram Drupal sites to talk to Laravel sites a little bit. That put a few extra gray hairs, I think, on both of our beards. But those, we can laugh about it now, but we were not laughing back in August and September. But anyway, those are things like, you think it's simple, one site this, and once it starts happening, it really, there's so many moving parts that, yeah. Somebody just wrote about, I'm curious how you stayed organized and communicated with all the volunteers, et cetera. I'm going to answer that in 1 second, but somebody also wrote WebEx. Yeah, WebEx, that was another one, but I think that's from Cisco, WebEx. But again, that was a paid for one, and I've used that before. I don't know if they've upgraded it, but I remember when I used it, it was so clunky, and it was like almost like a one-way thing. It was like a webinar, so it wasn't very interactive. Like, you couldn't really do a lot of this. It was a speaker talking, and people just kind of listening and not like kind of multiple screens and people everywhere. It was so you didn't get that kind of communal feel. So that was something I noticed with WebEx, which didn't really work out. Plus, you have to put their logo on everything. Cisco. but so that was not here nor there, but yeah, this thing about staying organized, we used a little bit of everything in terms of staying organized. Again, that's another challenge when you have a staff that's everywhere, so many people. And so each team, basically, we had like a video team which dealt with the YouTube videos. We had kind of a general conference team, which was like kind of a central clearing space for everyone. Then you had a room hosting team, and everyone had their own Zoom workspace. I'm sorry, chat Slack workspace. So we use Slack, and we set up each of the group leaders. I said, hey, go set up your own Slack workspace, and then get your people into that Slack workspace. And I was a part of all the workspaces. So you didn't have to be a part of all of them, but obviously as director of program, I was on all of them, looking and asking questions and monitoring and stuff. So we use Slack a lot. We also used email sometimes when you just wanted to contact a person directly, even though you can use it in Slack, sometimes people just actually respond to their email address, and you just sent off an email, boom, and then you would get a response back. But we would quickly bring that into Slack if it got to a lot of people. So that was something we did use. I'm still a big proponent of email, but I won't get into that diatribe. I still like email. I'm 45. I don't know. I still like email. But yeah, so we use Slack, and Slack was great. It really kept us organized in terms of communication, in terms of how to keep things, communicating with people and the different groups, so that we weren't on, and making different Slack workspaces wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. Initially, I was like, oh my God, I'm on like 4 or 5 different Slack workspaces. But in the end, it worked out because the overlap would have been crazy. If everyone was on the same like JALT conference Slack team space, that would have been crazy. Sorry, I just saw that Gary said, he says I'm 53. So, but yeah, we were all in the same conference space. I think it really would have been difficult. It's way too many channels. Slack is great, but sometimes you can get a lot of channels, and those channels don't get all used. And then you have obviously direct messages, and sometimes those don't get all used, and Slack will condense them. So if you don't use something a lot in Slack, it like disappears. It's there, but it disappears. So you kind of have to be aware of that. But if you have different, everyone just put their age in. Go ahead, come on, everybody. If you have different Slack workspaces, it really keeps things organized. If you have really different teams, so the main organizing space, that team had kind of as many people as wanted to be. You can be in it, you didn't have to be in it, but there are like, a good number of people, 45, 50 people on that in the main space. Then you had the videos, and they were just dealing with curating the YouTube videos. And that team had their own workspace. That was like, I think 15 or 20 people. And then you had the room host, which was like 75 people, and they made their own Slack workspace. And then I think eventually, once the conference started, I think we made a conference Slack space for presenters. So you can communicate that way. So there's not a lot of, and that's kind of all kept organized. And once it might sound confusing. I don't know if it sounds confusing, but once you get into the mechanics, and again, this goes back to teamwork. Once you know your team and you get into the mechanics of actually the logistics and everything of putting the conference together, opening up a new Slack space, it's almost like, oh yeah, do that, go right ahead. And you don't realize until the end, it's like, oh my God, there's 5 Slack spaces here, and it's like and you're going between them. If you're comfortable in Slack, you're going between them fairly seamlessly, if you have to. And then obviously the people who are like the room hosts, I think there were probably about 75 room hosts. Most of them were only in the one workspace. So I always had to go to that workspace to talk to all those people. So that was really something that helped us. Right now, I think we're looking at, we still use Slack quite a bit. I'm about to start up the conference organizing now. So sending out messages to people and getting everything ready for JALT 2021. So I'm going to start doing that now. And we still use Slack quite a bit. We're looking at, I don't know if anyone's heard of Basecamp. There's another one of those Basecamp, but I have to say I've used Basecamp for all of 2 days and I like it. I don't know if it's because of the situation that we're in, all the tech that's kind of flowing at you, but that seems even more usable and more kind of for like bigger teams and stuff. Basecamp, the way Gary has impressed upon us the use of things like MailChimp. Highly recommend doing something like that to deal with mass mailings. We kind of had a system, but it's very text-based, so it doesn't look pretty when it sends out a message. Not that messages need to look pretty and all, but just some kind of system, as Gary will probably say as well, getting some kind of mailing system to deal with contacting participants and contacting presenters and such is a very important thing. Yep. I like the name Basecamp. It sounds like kind of cooler than Slack. Slack sounds like you're not doing anything. Sounds like laziness, but it's a good platform. So yeah, but staying organized, that was kind of a big thing. And also when it comes down to it, me personally, I still use good old, I still use paper. I have a calendar. I have next to me. That's just near my workspace. I have calendars next to me with things checked off, and I have lists and pages and stuff like that. I have one book for JALT, and everything in it is JALT stuff, and I just start checking off names. That's how I did my dissertation. I actually wrote it on paper and put it in a notebook and just checked off page after page after page after page. So that's, and then eventually goes into the computer and gets to people. So I personally myself, again, maybe this goes with the gray in the hair, but I tend to start old school when it comes to organizing things. Put it on paper and then translate it into the computer and then send it to people, make lists, and then get into your Slacks and stuff like that. So that's just my personal process, the way I think. But it helps me figure out who's where and what to do. So I'm all about people. Yeah, it kills lots of people. Those, watch out for those paper scars. So yeah, any other, so let's see, try Basecamp. Yeah, okay. Okay. Oh wow, Basecamp from 2006. Oh, I didn't know that. That's amazing. It's been around for a long time. I had no idea. It's been around for a while. But it seems to be very, very user friendly. Basecamp, easy to use. Granted, I think a lot of us, maybe our digital IQs have probably raised quite a bit over the past year. I know that I've learned more about programming than I probably ever want to know. That's why I leave it to Gary. But it was really great. It's really have that knowledge, so you kind of understand how things work, and such. So our probably IQs have raised so much that when you see something new like a Basecamp, you don't really think too much. Oh my God, what is that? You just jump into it because you're kind of in it now. So you might as well just keep going. So Okay, so a few other things I wanted to talk about as I'm looking at the time here. Actually, yeah, a few other things I just kind of wanted to wrap up is, yeah, next year, I said a smidgen, I'm gonna start organizing for next year, but yeah, we're really looking at, because of last year, all online, this year, technically we're supposed to be having a physical conference in November, 12th to the 15th. We're supposed to be having a physical conference in Shizuoka. And that's still on the plan. I've actually contacted, or I had our staff contact the Shizuoka people in the Grand Ship in Shizuoka. It's a big conferencing center and multimedia entertainment center. Yeah, I had them talk, and they're still open to having a face-to-face conference in 2021. So they said we could have 100% capacity of the building. That's what they're planning on. Not sure how in like what's going to happen as things roll on, but they said as of right now, nothing has changed in terms of our reservation. So we're planning on a physical conference. That being said, this is a hybrid conference, so we're going to try putting that into play, some version of a hybrid conference. If we're doing a physical face-to-face conference, the next challenge is, yeah, to do a hybrid conference, because we have all this experience with the online format, bringing it to a, yeah, kind of like a physical online format and how that's going to run. So that's going to be the big challenge for this year, is figuring that out, figuring out what parts of the conference will be online, what parts will be face-to-face, how to get, how to kind of blend the two without totally overwhelming one or the other, or taking away from one or the other, because there's still quite a few people who feedback is, we love the online conference, but it'd be great if we could do a physical conference again. It'd be great if JALT 2021 was face-to-face. And there are some people who says it'd be great if JALT 2021 or all the JALT conferences were online, because it's just more convenient for them. So that's going to be the big challenge moving forward. I think for a lot of conferences actually that have had online experiences, how to blend a physical conference with an online conference, and what parts can be online or physical. So that's kind of what we're looking at. Because I don't think going back, having just one or the other is going to be doable. I won't say doable, but kind of ideal. I think people have tasted, they can still remember physical, and now they've tasted the benefits of an online conference. So what is, how can we get a blended environment? How can we get a blended environment? I think is going to be a challenge for conference organizers. So that's kind of the focus going forward. And yeah, that's kind of what I wanted to actually end with, was a little bit about that, is talking about the future.
That's a great segue into our next speakers. Thanks, Wayne. Wayne, you also, I believe, applied and are you going to the international conference in KOTESOL as well? Am I right about that?
Yes, actually, yeah.
Okay.
That's
what was your
I
topic?
I should know all the Padlet stuff. I don't have it up right now. I don't have it on top of my head. I was so focused on this, I didn't actually think about, like, that's right, I'm also going to be at the KOTESOL
a lot of
thing,
things.
yeah.
That's why we write everything down in a daytimer.
Yeah.
Well, we look forward to seeing you then, and thank you for joining our chapter meeting. Everyone, let's give them a round of applause. Silently.
Yeah, no problem. This was great. Thank you.
I'm gonna unmute my mic so it seems like you're not bombing.
No, and if you want, I'll if you have any other questions, I'll put my you can contact me at this email address, and I'll just put it in the chat.
Well, that would be great, and we want to have more friendly connection, and just make everyone more familiar with who is who in KOTESOL and JALT, so we can have more going on. And possibly, as Gary's going to get into, one of the advantages of working together and in some ways using the same website is we can advertise our events to each other more easily. So I'd like to
Yeah.
introduce our next two speakers who are going to talk about the Eventzilla. They're the creators of it. So Gary Ross is an associate professor at Kanazawa University in Western Japan, where he researches online learning. He's also the programmer and designer of the Edzilla online conferencing platform that he developed in response to the COVID-19 crisis and has now been used by thousands of users to experience online conferences. And he worked very closely with Stephen Henneberry. Steve Henneberry is a professor at the University of Shimane in Western Japan. He has taught at the university level in Japan since 1998 and holds an MA in academic technology and TESOL. He spent most of 2020 working to develop documentation and strategies for hosting conferences online using the Edzilla platform. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Gary and Steve to talk about the Eventzilla and how it evolved. Guys, and you can screen share if you like. I will mute myself.
Good afternoon. Can everybody hear me okay? Okay. I'm just going to talk a little bit about the Edzilla website and how we went about developing that. But first of all, I'd just like to say it's actually quite a privilege to be talking to you guys at KOTESOL, because back in Rhea, was it in March that you had your first conference online? When we were wondering what to do at JALT Call, one of the things I did was I looked at, are there any online conferences? And one of the first ones I came across was KOTESOL, and seeing that KOTESOL managed to organize an online conference gave us a little bit of confidence that we could move forward with the online conference. So, as I say, it's a real privilege for me to be here. Maybe Steve, you can say a few words about yourself before I talk about the system.
Not much to say about myself but I mean, I want to make just a small correction. I did not really help Gary program this website. I'm not a programmer. Okay, my degree is educational technology and TESOL, but I've learned enough about educational technology just to know that I don't know enough. And programming is not in my skill set. My area was in working with basically the hosting systems and getting the hosts ready and dealing with those kind of logistics and that kind of stuff. So that was basically, that's the area, that's the aspect that I'll be speaking on today. But I'll toss it back to Gary so he can continue.
Yeah, okay, first I'd like to tell you a little bit about JALT Call. As Wayne, you no doubt know what JALT is, as Wayne has spent the last hour talking about it. Call is the computer assisted language learning SIG of JALT. And we have a conference every year. I think we're the second or third biggest SIG in the JALT organization. So we're quite a big SIG, and we have our conference every year. We have our conference at the beginning of June. And of course, this year, and we essentially we decide the presentations by around about March, and it's April and May where we're just kind of finalizing the event space, etc. And so of course, as we know what happened this year, around about March, we are beginning to think, well, we have no idea whether we will be able to do a conference in a location, face-to-face conference, or whether we're going to have to go online. And essentially, our conference was going to be in the north of Japan, which would have been hard to get to. And basically, the decision was made for us. The university where we were going to host the conference said, well, you're not going to be able to do the conference here. So we had to make a choice whether we're going to cancel it or do it online in totality. Now, the JALT Call conference is not a small conference. We have like 130 presentations. We have a few hundred people come. So it was something that we weren't able just to throw up a quick website and, hand write a website. So, and one of the things that we thought about was, well, if JALT Call as the computer assisted language learning SIG cannot do an online conference, then nobody can do an online conference. So we felt that it was really necessary that we kind of led the way. And, you know, by chance, essentially, we were the first JALT conference of the JALT SIGs. We were next in line to have a conference. So we were the next people who were having a conference. So it kind of made a sense that we would kind of lead the way. In fact, PanSig, and Steve will maybe talk a little bit about what PanSig is, was going to be 2 weeks before us, but we decided, we talked to PanSig and said, look, why don't you move your conference to 2 weeks after our conference and you can use the same system. So there were like, essentially we organized 2 conferences. One was the JALT Core conference, and then following that, a couple of weeks later was the PanSig conference. So one of the things when you're a programmer is that you basically can spend a day programming something that's going to save you 20 minutes. It's a habit of programmers. We look for a way of saving time, but we actually spend more time programming the thing than the time we save. This is the bane of being a programmer. But I did feel that it was really a good opportunity for us to make a new system that would really make the conference easy for people to join, easy for people to use, and that was basically the idea behind building a new website. So one of the funny things, of course, is that back in March, when I was deciding on making the website, I was thinking of, I have to choose a name, and you know, I live in Japan, and Godzilla, of course, is a big thing in Japan, and I like the term Zilla, and I just went to the domain registration and I typed in event zil.la, and it was available. So I was like, okay, well, this is a good name for the website. So I then discovered later that there is actually another website called Eventzilla. So this has caused some kind of confusion. Now there are actually 2 websites called Eventzilla. And I'm renaming the website to Edzilla, which is why there are maybe you're hearing 2 different names at the same time, but because conferences are already in progress, the actual official announcement has not happened yet. That's why there's a kind of maybe a confusion about the name of the website. Okay, so basically the original idea was it was to make it easy for organizers to collate sessions and presenters and attendees to be able to easily enter the sessions. But of course the system has, it's conceptually grown since this early stage. And we're going to talk about, myself and Steve will talk about the future of how we view the website. I quipped before, I would like it to be LinkedIn but useful, but I'm not sure if that's really a direction that we really want to take the website. Now, strangely, when I first suggested making a new website, developing a new website in order to host the conference, there was actually quite a lot of resistance within JALT Call itself. One of the, basically they had the idea of, let's just make a Google Sheet, make the columns the presentations, and at the top just put Zoom links. You have to remember this was back in March, when nobody really had conceptually an idea of how a conference was going to work. And you know, there's nothing wrong with these kind of simple solutions. I like simple solutions. All you do is get a Google document, you put all your presentations in the Google document, you put the Google links in, you share the Google document, people click those links, and they're in the Zoom rooms when they need to be. That is a completely valid, I think this is a valid solution. It's a good solution for many people. You keep it easy. But of course, our conference was rather larger than that. We have over 100 presentations. And once you start doing things like that, and different team members are updating different things, then of course that system kind of falls apart. It's not scalable is kind of the word we use in programming. Once you have more than a certain number of people, then it doesn't really, it won't really work. And of course, when we were discussing the conference, we didn't really have any experience to fall back on. We didn't really, there were so many questions about how would an online conference work? Pricing, posters, sharing videos, will it be pre-recorded? Will people know how to present within Zoom? What is the best way to share video? Should we pre-record? Will pre-recorded sessions be viewable in advance, or will they be scheduled? So there are a lot of questions that we had. Now, I just want to say today, I'm not doing a workshop as such, like showing you how to use the system, but of course, if people have questions, and there is a question and answer session later, I'll be pretty happy to show you how the system actually works technically and how, but anyway, one of the very, very early technical decisions I made was that every presentation would take 1 click to get into. That was basically the rule. And I think that is why the system works. A lot of people have said, oh, the system was really easy to use, because once you get to the session, if you're at the session at a particular time and you only need to click and Zoom opens and then you're in Zoom, then that is kind of basically the site has done its job on a simple level. Now, of course, we all know that Zoom you can make 1 click and enter, but of course, that doesn't mean you have to use Zoom. You could use WebEx, or you could use anything else that takes almost any system that allows people to jump in with 1 click can be used within this. And that was an early design decision that I made. Because I wanted to be a bit like a real conference. When you're at a real conference and you're in the building, how do you get into the presentation? You open the door, you walk in, and there you are. It's as simple as that. There is nothing complicated. No, when you go to a real conference, people don't say you have to do this, 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 and this in order to enter the room. You simply open the door and you're in there. So an online conference where people haven't experienced such a thing needs to be that simple. And that was very, very important. And sometimes people get, in fact, this idea was, some people found this idea too simple. In the days leading up to the presentation, we had presentations asking questions like, how do I enter the Zoom room? And because the link's not there. I was being facetious, but, jokingly saying to people, you do not try to enter a room of a real conference 3 days before the conference starts. You don't show up at Tokyo Busan, walk in 3 days in advance and try to enter a room because the conference hasn't started yet. It's exactly the same thing. You don't see the Zoom link because the conference hasn't started yet. So you have this kind of disconnect, and this is a natural disconnect, that people who haven't experienced an online conference are kind of thinking, well, how do I enter it? Where is the link? But then, of course, you say, all you need to do is show up on the day and you can 1 click and you're in. Then that makes things easy for them, even if you can't see the link. Of course, I updated the website later on based on that to say things like, the link will appear on the day. These kind of simple technical updates in response to people's confusion were things that were part of the process of building the website. There are other issues that can lead to confusion. Things like people can get confused by simple things if they haven't done something once. Something like the word registration. If you say the word registration, people get confused by this. They're like, oh, I've registered for the website on the JALT. I've registered for the conference on the JALT website, or the JALT call website, or the KOTESOL website. How do I get into the real conference? Where is it? Of course, if it's on a separate website, people get confused because they think do I need to register on 2 websites? The word registration itself can be a very confusing word. And so you need to make sure that in any system that you are very, very clear about this kind of terminology, where people need to go. And these kind of confuse, you know, people seem to think, well, I've registered on JALT call website and therefore I'm magically teleported to the conference on the day or something, or is a link going to happen on the KOTESOL website? And that was something that we did on JALT call. We made an active decision to have one website that represented the conference, and that website was the Eventzilla website. We deleted the old website. There was only one website and everybody paid through that website, and that made things kind of easy. Everything was in one location, because people do get confused about where things are if things are online, especially if you've got umbrella websites and you've got conference websites and you've got registration websites and you've got payment websites and you've got Zoom to go to. So suddenly you've got 5 different things and people are like, well, how do I actually go to the conference? People need to know where the conference itself is. So basically, Eventzilla was essentially programmed from scratch, and I started programming on May the 5th. I actually have my Git in front of me, and I can actually see May the 5th. I think it's 11:09 p.m. I'm a night person, it seems, and I started programming it. So the conference was about 30 days away on that point, and we needed to publicize the event and have the presentations entered in the system. So I think the first version that I made went live within a week or 10 days. And it's an interesting experience, I think, when you have to organize something very quickly. I think in a certain way, it's quite liberating. No doubt, with KOTESOL's national conference, it was much the same thing. And even a conference like that, you know, a meeting like this, you know, you feel that it's pioneering, it's quite exciting. Luckily, I was also the conference chair of JALT call. So, and, you know, I think, I mean, Steve has heard me mention this before, but I think conferences and organizations can be hampered by what is known as it's called the bike shed problem. It's also, I think the proper name is called the law of triviality, which you can find on Wikipedia. And basically the law of triviality is where dozens of people have suggestions and inputs in meetings to try to discuss things. And when you have 20 people in a Zoom meeting and 20 people all have their own ideas of how something should work, then of course you end up spending a lot of time discussing each one of those ideas, as opposed to having somebody who is a bit more dictatorial, I think maybe is the word. And I think, but in this case, the conference we had so little time to do the conference that it really was a case of, this is how it's going to work. But please put your suggestions in a Google document and I'll look at them and I'll try to implement them. And if I don't have time to do it, I'll simply write, I don't have time to do this. And that kind of was quite interesting, because it meant that the conference organization went fairly smoothly, actually, because we felt that members of the team, and obviously I was one of many members of the team, we had to do all sorts of things like the YouTube and other things, and these kind of things meant that the leaders of each group basically made unilateral decisions what the best way forward was, as opposed to spending a lot of time juggling 20 different people's opinions about things. And I think that was through necessity, but I think it was also something that was quite effective in how things can. I think this can be a problem with the volunteer organization. Wayne talked about, and I know that KOTESOL is also a volunteer organization. I think one of the things about volunteer organizations is that you can feel that well, since everyone is volunteering, then everybody equally should be able to say, let's do this, let's do this, let's do this, let's do this. But on the other hand, I think companies don't work like that. Companies are like, well, one person is definitely the leader, and they all say at a certain point, this is how we're going to do it, and you move forward. And I think that can be helpful. Anyway, so essentially, in JALT call, things went very well. I remember when JALT call finished, people talked about, the system it kind of feeling quite historical in the sense that, we had 800 people, 60 different countries. So we had a lot of different people come to the event, and basically it ran quite smoothly. But there were a few things that we really felt we didn't have much time to get right. And for example, one of the things we did was on the Thursday evening, like 10 of us had a meeting, like, okay, this is how to host a Zoom meeting. And the conference was on the Saturday. And then come the Saturday, most people did a good job. But when I didn't actually do any hosting, but I jumped from room to room to room to see how things were going. And it was very clear that hosting the rooms is actually a lot more complicated than you think it is. And that is something not to be overlooked, is who is in charge of each individual room. And I'm going to ask Steve to talk about the hosting aspect of things.
Okay, thanks, Gary. Yeah, first of all, one thing that's interesting about presenters in general is most presenters do not know how to give a good presentation, period. The best presentation I ever saw was the worst presentation I ever saw, because it was the presentation that convinced me that I could give a presentation, and it changed my academic life. But when you put these people who might not know how to present because they're used to a communicative classroom where they're walking around interacting individually with students rather than lecturing, because as language teachers, we're not by nature lecturers, which is what presentations generally are. You put them in a situation when they need to do this, but now they're doing it online in Zoom using a new tool, which they might not even know, and it becomes even more daunting for them. So because of this, we knew that we needed room hosts, and we knew that we needed room hosts who could guide them through the process and hold their hands, more so than just like the volunteer girls who sit in the back of the room holding up the 5-minute placards. JALT call was the first experience being a room host for all of us. I mean, of course, we've been teaching using Zoom, but being a room host was a little bit different. And we had to learn a lot of things. There were the logistics that needed to be dealt with. For example, the Zoom user accounts. All the hosts had to have access to those. Host schedules, getting hosts matched up with the different presentations they would do, and getting that completed in a timely enough fashion so that hosts can plan ahead. Additionally, communication. Communication was key in getting the hosts prepared for the conference, because we all had to be on the same page. And like Gary said, in the first attempt at this with JALT call, we were learning on the fly, because we had discussed what we wanted, and I had a rough script that I had prepared, and we worked through it, but some people were having difficulties, and like I was jumping in and I would find myself like sending private texts to the actual room host saying, hey, you forgot to do this, don't forget that. And so we realized that we needed better training for the hosts. In JALT call and with PanSig, most of the training was done via Google Docs. Everything was in Google Documents. We had checklists and scripts. And for JALT, what happened was the training sessions got moved to Zoom, which is a different story, which I'll discuss a little bit later. So as I said, we had scripts. Gary and I had discussed the concepts we needed before the JALT call conference. And then I put together a rough script that I was using, and I shared that with everybody, and that kind of became like the standard script for JALT call, and then we adapted that for pan-sig. Excuse me. Troubleshooting for the hosting. At first, of course, Gary and I were running room to room, checking on other hosts, making sure they're doing okay. But looking forward, we realized that the best troubleshooting is good preparation, which is why we tried to implement better host training. We want to implement better presenter training also, presenter training and preparation, because that's an issue that comes up where some of the presenters aren't prepared to present via Zoom. And haven't practiced doing for example, I haven't practiced using Keynote with Zoom or PowerPoint with Zoom before. But stuff happens. So for pan-sig, we implemented the help room, which was where people could go if they needed assistance, which was just a separate Zoom room. But we also had the help staff jumping back and forth, like other volunteers like Gary and I just jumping in other rooms to make sure that the other hosts were okay. Post-conference, of course, we had reflections where we thought about, okay, how can we improve? And it worked out really nicely because we had JALT call, and then at the end of JALT call, they're like, hey, Gary, can you have this ready in 2 weeks for pan-sig? And so we had those 2 weeks to think about how we can improve on the host training. So the documents were completely rewritten and revised for that. And of course, after the conference is also the editing and uploading of videos, which need to be dealt with. And that's so that you can have the time shifted content, because it's one of the things that is really kind of I can't place the term. It's a game changer with conferences like this, because how often have you gone to a conference and you see two presentations that are scheduled at the same time and you have to choose one? And then you write down the name of the other presenter and you say, okay, I'm just going to try to find this person at the drinking party, the party later, and ask them or try to follow up. With these conferences, if we can get these videos up in a timely fashion and make them available to anybody who had registered for the conference, then you can view those later. So that's something that's very powerful about this change to online conferences. I guess at that point, I'll throw it back towards Gary to talk about what happened with JALT 2020. Gary, you're muted. Beautifully muted. It's wonderful.
There we go. Yeah, just shows what I know about tech. So after the JALT call, then pan-sig, both of them large conferences, also some others like extensive reading started using the Events Alert web system. And Wayne, I believe Wayne, I think it was during the, I'm not sure if it was during pan-sig or JALT call, but Wayne saw that the system had worked pretty well and said, this looks as though it's something we could use for the JALT conference, and so we agreed to use my system for the JALT conference. Now, there's a big difference between the JALT conference and the other conferences. It basically, there's one of the first difference is one of scale. I think maybe I'll just make, since I actually haven't shown anybody the website, maybe I'll just quickly share the screen so you can see. I'm just going to quickly share the screen and just see if you can see. Okay, here we go. Does that work? Can you see? Yeah, okay. This is actually not the real web system, because this is my local testing system. So, but this is basically, this is what the front page looks like. There's a broken image because it's just my testing system, not the real system. And you can see all the information about the JALT website here. I will be redesigning this page because I'm not particularly happy about the design of this page. But if we just go to sessions, for example, you can see how big a conference JALT is by, I'm just scrolling all the sessions. And when I was building the website, it immediately occurred to me that this kind of massive amounts of scrolling was just not going to work for things. So one of the things I responded to was by making these like very, very quick ways that you could drill into. For example, here's Tuesday, November the 17th, just click it. And then of course it all changes to Tuesday. And if I want the business communication ones, then immediately you're taken to these kind of the business communication ones. And then I'm going to click here. And this is now these are dummy images. These are not the real faces of the presenters. And
Is that Abigail?
yeah, this is Abigail. This is not Abigail. I actually go to a website that generates fake faces, and I take hundreds of faces. So this is Abigail's page. You can see that Abigail is doing this one, and she's doing it for English specific purposes. And then you can find all the sessions. Now on the actual conference itself, there will be the link into the Zoom room, and this will appear, it will just kind of pop into place when the presentation actually happens. And then there's also a live schedule as well. So this was one of the things that I made, one of the differences I made was that I made it kind of easier to make things available. And there's also things like the presentations you like the most, then you can just click your favorite sessions, and you can see all the sessions that are my favorites. People who are lost in space here are people who haven't uploaded their picture. Now, one of the big things that I felt was important was that it was important for presenters to be able to upload their own information about the presentation. So, for example, this one here, this is actually Rab. This is Rab Harrison, who's a friend of mine. Now, this is not Rab. If I click here. So there's the option within the system to actually upload what we call presentation assets. Now, this is great because we all know what happens at the end of a presentation. Everyone goes, oh, can you give me the PowerPoint? Or can you give me all you need to do is the presenter just uploads it and it's right there. And then in this case, it's a YouTube video, but the presenter can also upload other information which is about the presentation itself. So that was one of the major changes that I made, was that I made things that it was easy to find presentations, and it was also easier for presenters to upload and share information for the session itself. And every session has its own like URL. So all the person needs to do, and I'll probably add some share options here. All the person needs to do is click the URL and share it. You know, you send the URL to your friends and say, this is my session, and you can post it on your. And this is something that I did right from the beginning. None of this stuff is behind a wall as such. Now, getting into the Zoom rooms, you have to have your ticket, but actually seeing that the presentations is happening, seeing the abstracts, they're not hidden. And that's good because it means that you can publicize your event without it being hidden behind something. And a lot of people, I think there's sometimes this idea that you need to hide things if people aren't paying for them, but you don't want to hide things that are publicized. You want to publicize your conference. And the website is based on this kind of idea that everything is open except getting into the sessions themselves. And
Gary,
the other,
Gary,
yeah.
if you could go back to like the RAB page that you had, or whoever's page, whatever.
Yeah, okay.
One thing here, when you visit this site and you see this and you're like, well, geez, I'd really like to follow up with this person, but how do I do that? Well, as a presenter, you have the ability to upload assets. So for example, this is a QR code for my email address, and I could upload this to my asset as one of my assets to my page, so that people can come there and say, well, geez, I want to follow up with this person and get that contact information, be able to communicate with me that way. Because a lot of times we don't have that ability. You look at the pamphlet for the conference and you don't see the email address of the person. Maybe because some people don't want to share it, and we can't just push those out without permission. But as a presenter, if you want to put up your email address, probably as a QR code so it doesn't get picked up by bots and stuff, you can do that so that people can reach out to you and
I'm going to
communicate
stop
with you.
sharing as well, just so we can get back to that. Yeah, and that's an important point. The other thing that JALT call was different about was the sponsors, and I created within the website, there is a sponsor, there's a exhibition space where all the sponsors can go in, upload, they can put in information about their products and so on and so forth. So that was something that was needed to be added after the Pan-SIG conference. But there was something, I think there's something interesting about sponsors, that sponsors themselves need to understand that online conferences aren't like regular conferences, particularly if you have a big exhibition space. Now, in a regular conference, a big exhibition space kind of doubles up as a social space as well. There's coffees and people hang around there. So people walk into the exhibition space, and naturally there are hundreds of people milling around, and then you get these people walking to the exhibition space themselves and talking to the sponsors, and there is this natural traffic that happens. In JALT, what happened was the sponsors had their own Zoom rooms. I've written down the quote, if you make it, they will come. This is absolutely not true when it comes to Zoom rooms and sponsors. Even if you make it, they're not necessarily going to come. I went into a lot of the sponsors' rooms and they were kind of empty because people are not milling around within individual spots. That Zoom work is not like a real space anymore. So that is something you definitely need to think about. And the solution, I remember posting on the Slack, I said, maybe the solution to this is that you have a lounge room, and that lounge room, you have maybe one lounge room, and maybe Steve will talk about this later, but you have one lounge room, and that lounge room is the social space of the conference. You don't want to divide it up into lots of rooms. You have the one lounge room, that becomes the social space, and it can be a Zoom room, and people can come in at any time you want. And then the sponsors are within that space. Now, one of the game changers of Zoom was the self-selecting breakout room, where you create the breakout rooms in advance and people can just walk into them. And this is great because it means that if 50 people go into the lounge room and they see, oh, there's this room about this room about this room about this, and you can actually say to them, hey, can you visit our sponsors room? That is a kind of technical solution that I think works better than trying to have too many different types of Zoom rooms for different purposes. I feel that people will go to presentations in a single Zoom room, but actually socializing, one is enough, maybe two. Steve, I think Steve had more to say about
well, I think with the lounge, the way that we actually ended up using it at JALT Call, and I don't recall if we did it at Pan-SIG or not, but at JALT Call, basically we had somebody who sat in the lounge and they were basically the gatekeeper. And because often, you know, you've got a presentation, and after the presentation, people walk up to the front and want to talk to the speaker.
I think you're
They
talking
wanna
about JOLT rather than JOLT call, but anyway, go on.
Huh?
You said JOLT call. I think you meant JOLT.
I did, probably.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry.
Sorry. Apologies for the confusion. So at PanSig, and then definitely at JALT, we had basically the lounge, and in there we had kind of like the gatekeeper or the lounge host. And as I was saying, you've got, at the end of a presentation, people always rush to the front, and then the other person is coming in with a computer, and there's the, you know, a crowd up there. And oftentimes you continue the conversation in the hallway because you can't continue it in the room anymore, or you walk together someplace else and have the conversation. Well, you're online. You're like thousands of miles apart, possibly. How do you handle this? What we did is we would just say, hey, if you want to continue the conversation, we've got another presentation starting in this room in 10 minutes. Please go to the lounge. And when you get to the lounge lounge host will select a room for your presenter and for you to join your presenter to continue the conversation.
And just
So the lounge,
here.
so the lounge rooms aren't necessarily pre-named. I mean, you could name them like, you know, I don't know, dog, cat, duck, whatever, but just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is fine. But if you give them specific names, then you can't, if you've used Zoom breakout rooms in your class, you know, you can't rename the rooms while they're active. You've got to close them. So you've got to name the rooms like room 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or like duck, dog, cat, whatever, you know, Pisces, Capricorn, whatever you want to do. And then the room host just has to keep a piece of paper, like, you know, like going old school, like Wayne likes to rock it. And on a piece of paper, keep a list of, okay, you know, Wayne Malcolm's presentation, he went into room 3. So if anybody wants to talk to him about his presentation, he's there. Or even if they didn't come from a presentation and someone just comes in and says, hey, I'm coming in here and I'm interested in talking about baseball or whatever, I don't know. And the person can say, okay, I'll put you in room 4. We'll call that the baseball room. And so the lounge is an important aspect. And it's a great way to give people a place to continue the conversation.
Yeah, and an important point is back to that initial conceptual idea that I had, is that you can enter any presentation through one link. That means that link can be put anywhere on the website. And what you do is you schedule the lounge to be running all day. So essentially what happens there is, I can't demonstrate the live schedule because obviously there's no live conference happening right now, but what happens is on the live schedule is essentially you go to a single page. In the KOTESOL conference, it would be like KOTESOL Eventzilla/live. And it shows what's happening now, and everything that's happening now is just one click away. So that means that the lounge is always there at the top, and people can always just jump into the lounge through that one click. You can also put that, you could make that as a kind of public space if you wanted to encourage people to go to the real conference, you know, so that would be something, it would be up to you whether you make that a closed thing or not. But the lounge space is really important. And this was definitely one of the things that we came from JALT call, where we had no concept of how a conference was going to run, to coming out of JALT call going, oh, we definitely needed a lounge space during the day. We had a party space at night. You know, that was the thing we did plan. I think it was the first thing we planned. And
priorities.
and so that was kind of successful. And then seeing, but the interesting thing was that when the same system was used for JALT itself, because the scale of JALT was so much bigger, I think there was the feeling that there needed to be more than one lounge space. So there needed to be like a SIG's lounge space, and then there needed to be another lounge space. And I went into the SIG's lounge space and it was always empty. Everybody just went into the regular lounge space. You know, you go into the SIG's lounge space and there'd be one person in there, and you'd go, I'm leaving, I'm going to the regular lounge space. Now, of course, at this point, JALT did not know that self-selecting breakout rooms was going to be an option. This was something that Zoom only added in the weeks leading up to the conference. And this can be an issue where technical additions to Zoom, which require people to have the latest version of Zoom, then won't work for everybody because people haven't updated their thing. Now, one of the things we've been talking about Zoom all the time because that's what we used, but the Eventzilla system doesn't have to use Zoom. Anything that is a click away, it will work with. In other words, Eventzilla is just this place to help you get into the Zoom place. It's the kind of the meeting place that is, it's almost like the director of the conference. It's a bit like the space in the building of a real conference where, well, the conference is actually happening in the rooms themselves, but Eventzilla kind of is the kind of space that allows you to get into these. So it doesn't have, you don't have to use Zoom. You can use whatever you want, but conceptually you want to make sure that people can get into where they're trying to go through a click. If you have to install lots of things, if you have to join systems, then things become more complicated. And I think I'm going to talk maybe a little bit about how we view the future of how the system will work or Eventzilla. And I think one of the things I think it's important not to think in that online conferences being the same as a regular conference, but online. I think it's Steve's probably heard this one a lot, but as an analogy that I like to give is that a car or a train is not simply a horse with wheels. Although functionally they might have seemed kind of similar, they both move you around. They take you from A to B. If we look at early cars in the 1910s or the 1890s, they look like horse-drawn carriages because that was the paradigm people were thinking in terms of. I think that recently, I'm going to share my screen. Recently, I was in a, including gratuitous picture of motorbike. I was touring around Japan recently on my motorbike, and I came across this town here, which is a postal town. These are the old postal towns that have been preserved, and basically they existed because post was delivered by horses. And so what would happen was that, I'm going to stop sharing. Basically what would happen was that people had to stop and park their horses, feed their horses. You needed blacksmiths, you needed inns, you needed places to eat, all of these things, okay, you have. But once trains were developed, they no longer serve a purpose because trains bypass these things. So in other words, for as long as the horses are around, these places are necessary, and these are the ways communities develop. But once you change from the horse to the train, although they are fundamentally the same kind of thing, getting you from A to B, these towns serve no purpose. And I think in the same way that we need to, but instead what you have is you have train stations and you have hotels and train stations, you have cities that grow out. And so in other words, although the two things are conceptually quite similar, horses and trains, you can't think of them in the same kind of way. And I think this happens with regular conferences and online conferences. People think in terms of online conferences in the same terms as regular conferences. A perfect example is the poster session. There's no such thing as a poster session on an online conference because you can't have a poster. A poster on an online conference is going to be a PDF or Well, a PDF online is exactly the same as one page of a
Or your background.
or my background. Yeah. So in other words, people keep, I've heard this many, many times, is how are we going to deal with poster sessions? It's like, well, you don't have poster sessions. You have a different kind of session. You might try to mimic how poster sessions work with people milling about, but at JALT, there were poster sessions because of course JALT had been planned before this happened. And of course people had submitted for poster sessions. So once JALT was, and the same JALT core, people were basically required to have poster sessions. But one of the interesting things is I went into 1 or 2 poster sessions, and every single poster session I went into had basically devolved or evolved, whichever one you prefer in this context, into a regular presentation. Because the person had their poster, they projected it, then people walked in and then they talked about the poster and people sat and watched it. And I was like, this is exactly the same as a regular presentation. This is no longer a poster session. Now people try to mimic the idea of a poster session. Well, we'll make Zoom breakout rooms and you can kind of wander in. But the nice thing about a poster session in the real world is that there is the physical space. And then you physically know when someone walks in and is hovering to be, and the person who's talking, asking questions kind of moves out the way, and then the next person asks questions. But that doesn't happen in a Zoom room. You walk into a Zoom room, you can't go, it's not like, oh, just someone's walked in, let this person ask questions. So it didn't really, poster sessions don't really work in an online context. That doesn't mean there's something that can't be similar. Just don't call them poster sessions. Try to think of them in terms of something new, develop something new in the same way that, to belabor the point, a horse is not a train with wheels, or is it the other way around? The same thing, you have to think.
Are we still on this analogy?
Yes, yeah, we still are on this analogy. I'm going to milk it.
Okay, so if I could, you can't milk a horse.
No.
or wasn't the line from the movie, you can milk anything with nipples, right? Oh God.
Stop it.
I'm sorry. So as to a poster session, you can do something with like your background, and when people come in and basically if most of the information is here, or even if this is just a QR code to a URL to download your PDF, then the people can view the PDF on half of their screen and have you on the other half of the screen, and then they can chat with you. So you can have poster sessions work, but it's just not the same as simply wandering around.
It's not really a poster anymore. It's just something different, isn't it?
Well, yeah, it's a little bit different. But I mean, there are ways that it can be done if you want, if that's something you want. But anyway, it's like the whole thing about taking like a square peg in a round hole. You know, you're trying to take a face-to-face conference and fit it, you know, it's a square peg. It doesn't fit into the round hole of an online conference. You know, you've got to shave things off to get it to get in there.
Yeah, and another couple of things is that
see how fast that analogy was, Gary?
Yeah. Okay, sorry, I do go on a bit. Sorry. Okay, talking about one of the other big differences about an online conference is that is the concept of sharing, and basically the presentation lives on after it's done in the form of like a video or just a page that represents the and I think one of the questions is making the how can we get the conversation to continue, and that I think is an important point about online conferences. One of the things I've said, basically sessions they're basically removed in time and space. So of course now we're thinking, well, online conferences are different in different. My phone, my watch is talking to me. So basically, we're thinking in terms of online conferences being removed in space, but actually they can be removed in time as well. And I think this is an important thing, that online conferences are fundamentally different from regular conferences because of the way there can be a recording of the session and people are seeing it online and they're going to a particular page. And this is, I'm just going to read out, this was the day after the JALT conference, and this was like I posted on Slack, and I'm just, maybe Wayne might remember it. I'm just going to read it out, what I posted. One thing I'd like to say, the conference isn't finished. I believe the week after the conference can be important as the conference itself, and this year especially. In a real conference, people go home and the site is shut up, but everyone is still online. The posters, the site, the AM pages, the videos are still there, and people's memories of the event are still there. Most people could only see 1 or 2% of the event. The other 90%, 98% is still waiting for many. We have an amazing opportunity to consolidate the success of the conference into something lasting and beneficial to the community. I mentioned the idea of a redux, and I think that creating ongoing conversations create opportunities to make this event truly worldwide. The glowing people's experiences will fade soon. This is the week to continue the conversation, although it's tempting to curl up in a ball and not come back till I'm called Rip Van Ross, and I'm sure many are feeling the same way. This was something I wrote the day after the JALT conference, was that with regular conferences, you have this kind of feeling it's done. Everyone puts things away, the physical space is closed up, you go home. But with online conferences, I think it's better to think in terms of it's an ongoing conversation, of which the conference itself is central to that. And one of the things with Eventzilla that I'm doing is that's what putting information up about being able to contact presenters. And because the presenter can, because the presenter essentially has a little bit of control over their own page, what they can then do is that they can put up their own Zoom link and say, okay, I'm going to redo my presentation next week on Tuesday the 19th or whatever. So in other words, the conference doesn't really finish when once the official dates are finished. And I think that's maybe a good point for us to finish.
Well, I think, Garrett, if I can, I think this is a good time to do a callback to your line about LinkedIn, but useful. Because here you've got the site where each presenter has their own page, just like we each have our own pages on LinkedIn that we never go to. But you've got this page and you can use it to post information, your contact information that's actually relevant and has your research, has your presentations, and it's a way to actually continue the communication. So LinkedIn, but useful for academics. Garrett.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a roundtable discussion. I'm sure people have lots of questions. So I think I've said as much as I can. So I look forward to hearing questions in the next half an hour. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you guys so much. And round of applause to Steve and Gary. And that was a perfect, we can dovetail into the idea of a reduct in that this is a conversation that will keep on going. And what I understand is each time you make the conference, it gets better and better, right? So you started with a call, your PANSEG, your international conference, and it keeps
there were
getting
two
more,
or three others in between.
Right, so it keeps getting refurbished and redesigned. Let's see here. Joining us, so leading the discussion, I would like our three speakers from JALT to represent everything that you've been talking about and engage with our international conference chair and co-chair. So I'm calling, there's Lindsay, our conference co-chair. Thanks, Lindsay, for joining us, and Michael Free. Okay, so they're going to be leading the discussion, and if anyone else wants to ask questions or join in, you can feel free, but we are going to have a live talk about conference planning between our two organizations from now. So maybe, why don't you briefly introduce yourselves? We'll start with Michael and then Lindsay, and then it's a round table, so all of the people I mentioned can just jump into the discussion and create it as they like. We are scheduled to go till 5:30. Thank you.
Wayne, during my presentation, you had your background image. I had your big smiling face. So Every
Yeah.
time
It
I
looked
looked
like-
at this
so it
group
looked
of
like you
people,
agreed
I
with
was like,
everything.
oh, someone, and then I realized it was just a fixed smile the whole time. So
that's my regular background. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I was agreeing with everything you were saying.
I don't know if people can see, but I've actually put a bit.ly link on my background image, which
Terrible link.
it's just a open Google document, which you're quite welcome to just type into or ask questions. And I also put my email address in there.
I put the ugly link in the chat.
Yeah.
It's not bit.ly pretty, but it'll get you there more quickly than trying to copy that from Gary's image.
Yeah.
But I think Michael was about to introduce himself.
I was muted. So
You're muted. So Gary started talking. You can't give Gary 5 seconds of silence because he'll fill it.
understood. My mother was the same way. Well, that's awkward.
Good company.
I'll take that as a compliment.
Take it
You
as a compliment.
take it however you like. Hello, everybody. I'm Michael Free. I'm the KOTESOL International Conference Chair for 2020. No, wait. Thank you, COVID 2021. I don't know that I have much else to say other than that. I will warn you, if I suddenly burst into tears, it's just because I'm getting a lot of great information right now. And I also have a lot of things going on in my head. They've mentioned they're getting gray hair. I'm just losing mine a little bit. Other than that, I'll just let people introduce themselves. And if you have questions about what we're going to do for KOTESOL 2021, which is coming up soon, I'll be happy to answer those. And it's actually looking really good, really not good, really good, really not good, really good. There we go. Yeah, it's looking really good. Lindsay, talk to us.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lindsay. I think I've met most of you. I'm looking at the participant list right now. Most of you know me either through KOTESOL. I've been involved on the International Conference Committee for the past 9 years, since 2012. So I know registration backwards and forwards, and I've worked in various positions on other conferences, so I kind of know what's going on. And I've worked on conferences that are not KOTESOL also. So don't worry, I'm the co-chair now and 2022 conference chair. Don't worry, it's all in good hands. Ignore Michael. He enjoys that that panicked facade, but really we've got it under control. So nice to meet you.
I'm just venting. Now there's a great grand pause.
Should we introduce ourselves again, or should we?
I don't think you really need to.
Yeah.
All right.
Well,
Floor is open for questions or topics. So how are you guys going with the conference planning?
Bye.
Well, I think I would say that as was mentioned, that that with each conference that we've had using Edzilla, Eventzilla, it has improved. So by that line of reasoning, KOTESOL will be the best yet until the next one.
Yeah, I'm not at all worried about it. I think it's going to be an exceptional event. We have more than 100 presentations slated for over the course of 2 weekends, plus special events every weeknight. We've got a really awesome keynote speaker coming from kind of an outside of the box area that ties in really, really well with the theme of the conference, which is re-envisioning ELT altogether, which I think is fantastic. So we're actually getting somebody from outside the field of ELT to give us an outside perspective on what the future is going to be like, and then how that in particular will affect our industry. Michael is mentioning in the chat, yeah, he also has 8 other plenary speakers, and we've got some panel presentations lined up. The Eventzilla or Edzilla app is really cool so far. I've got a few questions about how to set stuff up, but I've used SCED in the past, which is extremely similar. So I think that will be a very nice, easy way to get everybody participating. We still have registration open, and we're doing something new this year for the first time. KOTESOL is unable to accept credit card payments, as all of you know. You've complained about it in the past. We can't accept PayPal payments either. I know it's a pain. I've complained about it too. I've complained about all of these things. That's not KOTESOL's fault. That's the fault of the Korean bank system and Korean laws for nonprofit organizations. So sucks to be us. But this year, for the first time, we have an early registration going until February 10th. And after February 10th, people can actually register directly on the Eventzilla/Edzilla app or site. They'll register there. They'll pay via PayPal to our friends here in JALT, who will accept credit cards and PayPal, as I understand it. And then afterwards, they'll transfer the money to KOTESOL. Now, normally we can't do that because if I, for example, said, hey, send me your money via PayPal, well, and I'll transfer it to, KOTESOL afterwards. First, you have to trust me. And second of all, that's money laundering. But it turns out that if we have...
That's illegal international.
Yeah,
banking.
right. So we're avoiding that. That's why we've never done this before. But we asked our legal guy, and he says it's cool if we get the app or a certain organization to collect the funds for us and then transfer that to us. And we'll have a list, of course, of where the money came from. So we're not trying to obfuscate like the source of our income or anything like that. So that's something new we're going to try, so people can actually register for the conference. For one price, though, they don't get any discounts after February 10th. You pay your one price, and it means you can pay via PayPal or credit card, or you can register in advance and just do it the way we normally do our conference, which is by bank transfer or TransferWise.
And this is significant because it means that people in Japan, who are in the same time zone, can attend your conference without feeling we've got to send money by bank transfer.
Yeah.
If I look at a conference and I'm like, oh, I've got to pay by bank transfer international, I'm simply not going to attend the conference. Now Eventzilla allows you just click the button, get ticket, and it's all automated. One thing I didn't show in my presentation, because I didn't really want it to be a workshop, was the admin area. And the admin area is, I think it's the thing that I'm most proud of actually, is it's pretty slick. It works very easily, it records all the payments. You can enter all the sessions and all those kind of things. So that makes things very easy. So everything, all the KOTESOL admin people will be looking in, will see all the transactions within Eventzilla. So you just click one link and they'll be all listed. So you'll see exactly how many transactions are happening, the ones that are happening through the PayPal. So that makes things very easy for you.
And actually, I can definitely support the idea that the admin area is fairly straightforward and easy to use. I've been playing with it over the past week, and it seems mostly very straightforward and user-friendly. So it's really, really cool that we have this app this year. Just for clarity, we have actually looked at other apps in the past that do have PayPal integrations and credit card integrations, and none of them wanted to work with the Korean bank system. If that tells you anything about what KOTESOL has been up against over the past few decades.
Wow.
Yeah.
Gary, maybe we should rethink this. If we have to work with the Korean bank system. Maybe we hadn't considered that.
Well, I know. As far as Japan is concerned, there's always not saying you guys need to rethink it, but transparency would be a big thing, because they do ask, like, why are you sending money to Korea? And it's not, but they do worry about money laundering. I mean, this has nothing to do with this conference, but when we were buying our house, my wife and I, we were buying our house, they made a pretty big thing about money laundering and how some people use, obviously shell corporations to send money from one place to the next. So they're pretty big on that. They're pretty focused on that. But if you can, but it comes down to transparency, basically. Yeah, I was just getting to learn to use TransferWise. I said, oh, here's another thing I have to learn to use TransferWise. So try to figure that out as well.
Yeah, our friends in Japan say TransferWise is actually really easy to use, but it is kind of a pain to set up because apparently in Japan, maybe only for foreigners in Japan, I'm not sure, you have to send a piece of mail as evidence that you live where you say you live. So it's like an extra week to actually set up everything with all the
there's a few hoops that we have to jump through to set up most things when it comes to money and sending money out of Japan.
Yeah, we feel you. We definitely feel you here. All right, Reese is asking about volunteer opportunities, and yes, you can actually go about volunteering to be a room host using that link that I provided in the Facebook group, or I can provide it again here too in just a moment. But our Zoom hosts, if you sign up for a minimum number of hours, and we haven't decided on the exact number yet, if you host a Zoom room for a minimum number of hours, we'll give you a 40% discount on registration. So that'll be a good way for people to volunteer and participate.
Would that be like a refund? So we pay and then we get money back or something?
Actually,
because we have to pay, right? Or
yeah, I think we'd prefer that you just assume you're going to sign up for the minimum number of hours and transfer the appropriate discounted amount. Yeah. Because we don't want to have to pay the banking fees to do any refunds. Because we don't do refunds
if you're
as a
going
general
back
rule.
and forth. Yeah, if you're going back and forth, that's those are costs, admin costs. You don't want to incur.
Right.
This is a change of topic here a bit, but it was something that came up in Wayne's presentation where he talked about setting up Slack, and that there were different groups of teams and set up their own Slack system. I think this is, personally, I think it's a bad idea. I think it's a good idea that maybe your presenters, if you want a Slack room, that they are separate. But if you have different teams within the organization setting up their own Slack system, then sometimes can be missing communication, and that actually that came to be an issue with the hosting. Because after, and maybe Steve will maybe mention about this, but after the conference had finished, someone said to me, there was a big message on Slack saying, why didn't the Eventzilla system have timetabling for the hosts? You had it for the presenters, but not for the hosts. And I was like, well, you've asked me 2 days after the conference is finished, that's why. Because that team was in a different Slack group. And I had no idea that this was an issue, because basically, and maybe Steve might talk a little bit about that issue of the hosting. He was a host.
I was a host. I had a section here that we didn't get to about scalability issues. I had it broken down into the good, the bad, and the ugly. And the good was we had a lot of volunteers and we had good communication and flexibility. People stepped up. And for example, I got sick on the first day and I reached out through the communication system and we had substitutes within 15 minutes. It was amazing for presentations that were 2 or 3 hours away. The bad was we had a lot of volunteers and the communication was via Slack, which required a learning curve. And everybody here, most of you here were present for Wayne's presentation. And do any of you recall how many Slack discussions or discussion groups Wayne mentioned? I mean, it was incredible. There were so many different discussion groups that it actually became a mess. It was too easy to miss things. The ugly, we switched from using Google Docs as the medium for training for room hosts to using video, which was great in concept, but bad in practice. And this goes back to Gary's favorite, woodshed analogy, the law of triviality, or the way I like to look at it is like death by 1,000 cuts, because we had like 5 or 6 video sessions, 1 hour each. But what happened was each person like asked question after question after question after question. And the person running the session never got through a complete session. And that was a problem, which is why we need to go back to either an on-demand video training system or text-based, which is what we used previously. This also led to too much, I apologize, I'm kind of like venting about JALT, which of course, but JALT being the biggest conference we've done so far demonstrates the scalability issues. And what happened was there was so much focus on the video training for the hosts, which, again, the host training is very important, that the scheduling of the hosts was actually not done until almost the night before. Okay. And this was a problem. For example, I hosted probably more than anybody else at JALT this year, even though I skipped 2 of my sessions because I was ill on Friday. And I went to bed Saturday night around 11. And at that point, the schedule for Sunday was just posted at 10:30 for hosts, because so much focus had been on training rather than on scheduling. And I went to bed knowing that I had 2 morning sessions. I woke up and learned that I had 3 morning sessions. Luckily, the third one was in the third spot, not the first spot. I checked back later and realized, wait, I've got 2 more in the afternoon. And then I added those onto my schedule. So I'm like, okay, no problem. I can do this. And then later, just chatting with Adam Jenkins, who's here, I was just chatting with him about something random. And he said, oh yeah, by the way, I think you've got something else later. And I ended up having more presentations. So there are scalability issues. And I think the focus on video training is what caused that.
It has to be said
So
that the host did an amazing job though at JALT. I mean,
yes, the hosting did go. That said,
so well done, and
that said, the hosting did go very smoothly, and we had very few issues. Everything was everyone had a host. Everything went fairly smoothly, but there was confusion with scheduling on the last day. One problem is that needs to be considered is communication before the presentation between presenters and hosts. You can meet your presenter in the room 5 or 10 minutes before the presentation and try to ask all the questions and prepare. How do you want to take questions? Do you want to be called doctor, professor? All these other different things you've got to go through. Are you going to use Keynote or PowerPoint? Have you used Keynote or PowerPoint before? Do you need breakout rooms? Do you want me to run the breakout rooms? Do you have any student images that need to be deleted in video later? Is it okay if we take video? All these things you need to ask. It's much better to handle beforehand. So that communication didn't work smoothly in JALT. I think this is something that Gary and I can work on doing through the site.
I think basically, I think it's easy to underestimate how big the hosting challenge is.
Yeah.
So take JALT. I mean, I think JALT had 500 presentations. Is that about right, Wayne? That's the ballpark figure. So let's suppose someone like Steve does a lot of hosting, and let's say most people can do 10 maximum. That means you need 50 hosts, and all of those people need to be trained. And then on top of that, you have to schedule them. But unlike a regular presenter who you say your presentation's on Saturday at 2 p.m., if you don't want that time, well, there is no other option. That is when it is. You can't do that with volunteers. You can't tell a volunteer who's volunteered to host. So that made scheduling really, really hard.
Yeah.
Because you need to make sure all the hosts are in a particular room. And so these are some of the issues that came up because, well, I mean, it's just a huge job. And one of the things I'll try to do probably with Eventzilla itself is have hosts built into the system. So they are not presenters, but they are part of the presentation, and they can be scheduled like that. And maybe just, here's an idea just coming from what Steve's good idea. Maybe presenters will be able to put in advance, I don't want it recorded, I do want it recorded. Therefore, the host can just go to that room and just see the checklist in advance. So these kind of things. But something like, instead of getting all the hosts going, or potential hosts going to long hosting meetings, I think show them some good presentations where the host has done a good job. So a lot of these are on the JALT website. So say, okay, here is a good example. You know, here was Steve hosting. Here is, and you can see the kind of checklist that they went through. And of course, that was something that I thought the hosting team did brilliantly at JALT, was that every single one of them knew exactly what to do. But the number of hours that was put into getting the host to that stage is probably more than it needed to be because of the way that it was done. But of course, I wasn't part of that team. And to be honest, because this comes from that thing I mentioned about Zoom, not Zoom, Slack before, because the hosting team decided to have a totally separate Slack account, I actually had no idea about these issues until after the conference. And it would have probably taken me 5 to 10 hours to program something, but you can't program what you haven't been asked to do. So that was one example of where having one team separate from another was really problematic, because at the end of the day, there will be people who kind of need to be everywhere. And I think just but Wayne is correct in saying Slack, if you have too many channels, that will and Slack itself,
it's dizzying.
I have problems with the most important thing you can do with Slack is go into the settings to turn off that button that says make a sound, because that will drive you insane if you're, I had to reinstall Slack, and it had the default, and literally 50 little clicks were going off every minute, it seems. So I was like, turn that off. So that's also part of notifications. Control your Slack.
I will say
if you're using Slack.
I will say, as things are going, maybe this we can agree to disagree on, because I actually had zero. I kind of thought the dissemination of teams for my sanity was actually much better from like myself as a director of program.
Right.
I thought being able to see the different teams there was much easier. Like, okay, I can go deal with the conference room host team without having the video curators inundated with messages or something, or I can basically just go and say, okay, what do you guys need? And then they tell me what they need, and then I'll go deal with other people. So I think from a 30,000 foot view, I was able to see each thing separately and see where they kind of connect. But again, maybe that's my personal management style in terms of being able to see where people
I think, of course, within Slack itself, so you can make the channels in Slack. Are they called channels? And you can just call it the team channel and not join the particular channels. So in other words, the sub channel, there are channels.
Yeah, but that's where I learned it gets very it got very messy, because that's what we tried to do with the initial main channel, and then those people who were on those teams were like, can we make our own team, because this is getting very messy in this. So I was like, yeah, go ahead and make your own team, because then it just helps. But in any regard, I think that's definitely to think about. But I think that's again the scale of what.
Okay, well, just to tie this in a bow, plan Slack carefully if you're going to use it.
Yeah, I think the scale.
Because these guys will go
that
back
we
and
were
forth.
dealing with,
It's endless.
Yeah.
But
it is
one
that.
thing,
That's something
one thing
to
I'd like to say
plan out.
from the hosting perspective is one thing that I think I would have preferred as a host was to be able to choose some of the presentations that I could host. Because, for example, there are presentations that I wanted to see, and I'm like, well, I want to see that, so why don't I just volunteer to host that one? And that's one way to make sure that your hosts are motivated. And that's one option. I think it'd be good if you can take an overlay of all your hosts, if you take their availability and you overlay that on your schedule, then you can see who's available on each time and try to do it equitably. But first, give them an options. Do you want to volunteer to host for any particular presentations, either because you know the person or because you're interested in the topic? That's something to consider, because I would have liked that as a host. I would have appreciated that.
Maybe I'll put
That's
that
something
in
that I would have
where
met.
people can volunteer to host things.
Yeah,
that would be something that I could add.
Well, we're doing it quite a bit different from JALT in that we're not providing all the Zoom rooms. The hosts are providing the Zoom rooms anyway. So I think what our current plan is, put up the schedule and say, here, sign up. And the end, they choose a room, they choose a time, maybe it's several hours in one place. They're the ones who are going to provide the Zoom details. We'll give them the instructions on how to do that. And then we'll just plug that into the app. Yeah, we've got a much smaller scale conference. This is exactly what the conference I worked on as a room host did. And it was good, and you have people stepping up to fill in the gaps.
Right.
So
are there still limitations on free Zoom free Zoom accounts? I don't recall. I have a paid account, so I don't recall.
Yeah.
I think there's still a 40-minute
limit. Number of attendees and time limits.
I think it's still 40 minutes and 100 attendees. I don't think we'll have more than 100 attendees for any one of the concurrent sessions. Most of the people who are signing up as volunteer room hosts have their own professional accounts, so we don't have to worry too much about the time limits. But for the others, even the free accounts, though, our workshops are officially 40 minutes long. So it would still, I think, be okay, even if somebody has a free account to sign up.
Yeah, I think
remind.
Zoom is still. I think Zoom is still doing unlimited. You might want to check because they have like a scroll across the top usually of the free accounts, and they'll tell you if they're doing unlimited or not. I think they're still doing unlimited.
I would say remind your hosts to actually use scheduled meetings and not use their, like Steve Henneberry's Zoom room. You don't want them to use their private Zoom room. You should
we need it scheduled in advance anyway, so that we can actually put all that information.
Yeah, but just make sure they don't use their personal.
No, their personal, because there's there's two types, right? So you can get the the one that's computer generated, so that it basically generates a new ID each time.
And you should if possible, you should have either one default KOTESOL backdrop for all room hosts, or Adam Jenkins, I think, is the one who did it, made a background for every single presentation at JALT, which was just insane.
Those were great.
That was insane. So I had like all these different backgrounds that I had for every room I hosted. But I think it's just fine to have just one default KOTESOL 2021 background, something simple like this.
Yep, we've actually got that ready already.
So you're ahead of me. Perfect.
You're on top of things.
For now. We might ask the Zoom hosts to have a slide that they can pop up with just like the upcoming presentations in that room, so that if people come in between presentations, they can look and double check and make sure they're in the right place. But I think we haven't really solidified that yet.
Well, one thing that's good is with Gary's system, it does have the live schedule. So, for example, you can always be on your computer in Zoom with the session, and then you pick up your phone, and on your phone, you've got the link to the live schedule, and you just refresh it, and it'll tell you, like, what is it, 10 minutes or 7 minutes, Gary?
No, it refreshes like every 30 seconds.
Yeah, but what is it? 5 minutes before the session
It
begins?
shows you the
Yeah,
presentation 10 minutes.
10 minutes in
10
advance.
minutes, 10 minutes before the next session starts, it'll show you all the next sessions. So if people know about that, that's really useful. And you can also, you can press the little heart button to like different ones so you know which ones you want to go to.
One point is that something that somebody said, I can't remember, but JALT had 10 minutes between sessions and someone said you need 15 because if someone finishes 2 minutes late and someone comes in and there's this kind of trying to set up Zoom things with 10 minutes only is not enough. But someone said 15 is enough. So that's something to consider. And I'll probably change the system where I'll maybe make it an option that you can change the system so it tells you 50 minutes in advance that you can enter a particular room, or 12 minutes or something like that. So essentially the live session just shows you it just says this is happening now, and then suddenly it will have a little 10 minutes before these are going to be happening in 10 minutes time. And then so it does mean that the lounge rooms are at the top all the time. Basically they're pinned to the top because they're happening all the time. So that makes life quite easy. In terms
it's a good
Sorry
way
to
for the
interject,
host to say,
Steve. It's it's a little after our scheduled meeting time, and we, the Busan chapter, have chatted and decided we'll keep the room open. Officially, our chapter meeting is over because we did start at 2 o'clock, and some people have been here for a while. But I know some people joined just for the roundtable. If you want to keep on and keep talking about the conference, you are totally welcome. So we'll just keep it going for a while. But if you've been waiting for the meeting to officially end, this is the official end. Unofficially, we're going to stop recording as well. So I would like to thank everyone.